Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We are getting people in the room, so 1 second.
Hi.
Oh,
You want me to run
upstairs? Yeah. Okay. So now we definitely have a quorum. So good morning, everyone. Lovely to see you all who are here on Zoom, and the two lovely ladies who are here with Elizabeth and I. It's so good to see you guys in person. I'll hug Heather in a minute. When we're not on the record. Do we have Michael on to do the?
He actually just went to grab.
Oh, that was Michael. Great. I hadn't met
Yes.
Michael.
Sun
Okay.
was on, and so we're Ryan.
Okay.
Good
there's
morning.
Ryan
How's
and
everybody
Sal.
doing?
Good
Good morning.
morning.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I can't be there with you today. I would have loved to have gone to LA.
It was a lovely flight down this morning.
I
And
bet.
it's lovely here in Los Angeles today, nicer than in the Bay Area
Hmm.
when I left. So
Rubbing it in.
Feels
Yeah.
quite cold.
it was chilly when I underdressed for how cold it was when I got out of the airport though.
Oh.
It was like 40 and I was not expecting 40.
I
No
can
worries.
do this housekeeping.
Okay, so Elizabeth is going to start and read the housekeeping announcements that Michael was going to read.
Okay, great. So welcome co-op members, liaisons, and members of the public to the co-op meeting. Thank you for joining us. Is somebody need to be muted? Okay. Okay. So this is a hybrid meeting with members participating in person and as well by Zoom. The goal of the meeting is, this format is to foster a more inclusive environment and effective meeting. If you would like to comment during the meeting, please use the raise hand feature if you're participating by Zoom, or raise your hand if you're in person. To use the raise hand feature, if you're using, if you're dialed in, please press *9, and the same to lower your hand. This will indicate virtually to the chair that you have a comment. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the State Bar website. If you are participating by video conference, this is a friendly reminder to please be aware of the surroundings behind you. Zoom captioning is also available. To enable, please select live transcript at the bottom of your Zoom screen and then select enable auto transcription.
Is that it?
That's it.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, good morning again, everyone, and I will go ahead and call this meeting of COAF to order and ask Elizabeth to take roll so we can establish a quorum.
Judge Rosie,
Here.
Michael Rhodes,
Here.
Heather Anderson,
Here.
Novella Coleman. Here. Sarah Good,
Present.
Block Richards,
Here.
Angelica Salceda. Here. Stephanie Santoro,
Here.
Sal Torres.
Present.
We, everybody is present, so we have a quorum. And
Yeah,
I
didn't
just,
call me.
oh my God. Sorry, Ryan Harrison. I apologize because I had already marked that you were here when I saw you. I saw you pop up on the screen. My apologies, Ryan.
All right, thanks.
That's what happens once you roll off as chair.
Okay, so everybody is present, so we have a quorum. And then I want to acknowledge Lauren Oakley, who's our liaison from California Lawyers Association. And then staff, we have Leah Wilson, our executive director, and I believe also Raul Duran from our general counsel's office. And then in the room, I'm Elizabeth Hom, and with us is Michael Tong, also from the Office of Access and Inclusion.
Great. Is this the first time we've had everybody in a while?
I think so.
Great. Well, again, it is lovely to see you all here in the room and on Zoom. So at this point, I'm going to open it up for public comment. Members of the public are able to speak on any item that is on our agenda. I would ask that the public limit their comments to 3 minutes if there are any. We do have a new public comment policy that allows folks to send stuff in writing in advance, but I don't believe we received any public comment in advance. So is there anybody, Shannon, that you can see that wishes to make public comment at this time?
No one has their hand raised.
Okay. All right. Well, seeing no one, then we will move on to item number 4 on our agenda, which is approval of our minutes from last meeting, which was August 26th of 2022. Hopefully everybody saw the meeting minutes. If not, I believe they're attached to the agenda on the State Bar's website. Does anybody have any comments or edits to our August 26, 2020 meeting summary? Seeing no one jump to make comments, would someone like to make a motion to adopt our minutes?
So moved.
I think that was Sal.
Yep.
And a second from anyone?
I'll second.
Second from Michael. And Elizabeth, when you are ready, we can take a roll call vote.
Anderson,
Yes.
Coleman,
Yes.
Good,
Yes.
Harrison,
Abstain.
Rhodes,
Yes.
Richards,
Yes.
Saceda.
Yes.
Santoro,
Yes.
Torres,
See, yes. Sorry.
Rosie,
Yes.
motion carries.
Great. All right. Item number 5 on our agenda is report from the chair. And that is now me as of this meeting. So good morning again to everyone. I'm excited to convene this first in-person meeting of the term and to meet some of you for the first time, which seems impossible to say. For Shalak and Heather, who we've been on COF together for 3 years, we've never met in person. So it's really nice to see some people here in person and to see everyone here together, which I don't think we've had in a while. So I'm really grateful for that. And I just want to say, that I am grateful to work with all of you. The members of this council work tirelessly on DEI issues in the legal profession, and I am so grateful to be among you. Your visibility and your experiences move us forward, and together we're making a real difference and championing diversity throughout the state. And speaking of championing diversity, I want to take a moment to acknowledge Ryan and his year as chair. And now we forgot you during roll.
Thank you.
Michael and I got together and are getting you a little something, but I wanted to take a minute, while we were all together to thank you for all of your hard work and your leadership last year. Leading this group is challenging and it's amazing. And you had the impossible task of building cohesion and momentum during a pandemic. And you managed to do it, and you kept us moving forward, and you kept us focused on our goals, and you led by example. And I just really want to take a minute, and I wish you were here so that I could hug you and tell you this in person. But I am so grateful for the 3 years that we've been working together and for the leadership that you showed last year. So thank you.
Thank you, Judge Kristen, and thank you, everybody. Yeah, it's definitely made the task as chair a very exciting and happy and pleasurable experience. So thank you so much. And I just wanted to congratulate you on becoming chair and Michael on becoming vice chair. And just to state for the record that I am so excited about continuing our work with the Loan Payment Assistance Program and the resources and work that we're going to do on imposter syndrome and other issues that impact our diversity pipeline to the profession.
Well, we are glad that you are here with us still, and for all that work. So thank you, Ryan. And when we see each other again in person in, I guess, June, we'll Michael and I will reach out to you before that and got a little something for you. We don't have Olga here, right?
I
Okay.
can't see her.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I know that we had a new CLA person.
Oh,
that we.
she's raised her hand.
Oh,
Great. Can we
Where?
promote Olga?
She's been
to-
promoted to panelist.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, there's Olga. Great. Hi, Olga. I wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself to everyone.
Sure. Good morning. My name is Olga Diaz. I'm new to CLA. This is the end of my second week. I am the Associate Executive Director of Inclusion, Outreach, and Strategic Initiatives, but you can just call me Olga. And I've spent most of my career in higher ed and public policy. So I'm excited to be joining CLA to focus on our DEI initiatives, which is part of the work that I've been doing both in the California Community College system and the UW University of Wisconsin system. And now I'm back in California just in time for a San Diego winter. So nice to meet you all virtually.
Thanks, Olga. We look forward to all the work you're going to do and working with you. Okay, I think unless anybody else has something, we can go on to item 6, which is the
Wait,
report from,
Wait,
Right,
oh, I
yes.
forgot to note and congratulate Leah Wilson for receiving the Attorney of the Year Award from the Wiley Manual Bar Association.
oh,
In particular, she was selected for the award because of her support for COAF and all of the work that we do to impact the diversity pipeline. So congratulations to Leah and thank you for your leadership.
Oh, thanks, Ryan.
congrats, Leah. Okay, Elizabeth, your report from the Office of Access and Inclusion.
And thank you. And it's really nice to be in person and to see everybody on the screen today. And Duan Nguyen, who's also a director in our office, apologizes she's not able to join us today. But I have just a few items I wanted to update you all on. As many of you know, we submit a report to the legislature every 2 years on our DEI efforts. And so we are working on that now. And so I will be previewing that report with Kristen and Michael and Ryan for some feedback before that moves forward and is submitted. So that will be coming soon. And then I also wanted to highlight a law student summer fellowship program that the State Bar will be administering in 2023. As many of you know, there have been meetings with COAF leadership and leadership from the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission on how to perhaps partner, because oftentimes DEI issues as well as access to justice issues are intertwined. So one of the ideas that came out of the last Legal Services Trust Fund Commission meeting was to invite 1 or 2 COAF members to participate on in helping to review applications for a law student summer fellowship program that the commission will be administering next year. And just a little bit of background about this program. In 2019, the State Bar, we issued a justice gap study where we found that there is a public interest drift for law students that enter school with the intention of pursuing a career in the public interest, but then find because of debt load, familial responsibilities, et cetera, that they're not able to do that and will often go to the private sector. However, if a law student has a summer internship at a legal aid organization, they're more likely to stay on track and not have this public interest drift. With that in mind, on the State Bar licensee fee statement, which for those barred in California, you should have gotten those, I think, last week. There is a $45 opt-out donation to the Justice Gap Fund. The statute allows us to take $5 from the $45 and set aside that to fund these summer law school internships. And so we anticipate that we could probably fund between 50 to 75 fellows for the summer 2023, and this funding would be for 2023 summer and 2024's summer. It is a really exciting opportunity. If there are 1 or 2 COAF members who might be interested in participating in this, I can then bring that information back to the Trust Fund Commission, and then we can move forward with that. We anticipate that a lot of that work would be in the first quarter of 2023.
I mean, I'm happy to do it if no one else.
I would love to, but I also want to promote it to my school and I don't want to have a conflict
Good
there.
point.
Otherwise,
Yes.
mine and others, but I wouldn't want to have a conflict
And
in case applications do come in
That
and
makes
make
good
it more
sense.
difficult for the commission to review.
And folks, oh, Novella has raised her hand.
Yeah,
To vol-
do it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, and then just two quick announcements about, I wanted to share out that on the diversity report card, we've now published by county analysis. And I think this is something that a lot of stakeholders have asked for in the past. And so we're really excited about that. So you'll be able to see that, I think, if you just go back to the report card and scroll through, there's some dig deeper boxes. And I think if you click on those boxes, one of those boxes that by county analysis will pop up for you. And then last, related to the attorney fee statement, there is a link in the attorney fee statement for the attorney census. And so we are doing things a little bit differently this year. Instead of having attorneys click through the survey, there is a link to bring them to the survey kind of outside of my state bar profile and outside of kind of the fee billing process. And so if you log into your my state bar profile, there's two boxes, and then I believe it's the second link under those two boxes. So if you yourself haven't completed the attorney census, I would encourage you to do so. And if you have colleagues who haven't done that yet, it'd be great if you could let them know that that's available to them. And for this year, we're just collecting demographic information. And oh, and sorry, the last reminder I have is that even though we are just starting, Judge Kristen's new term as chair, the appointments for the 2023-24 session will be happening. Typically, the Board of Trustees makes those appointments in July, and typically those applications are available in January. So I know that there will be several vacancies, unfortunately, on our council for next term. So if you could share that out when that becomes available, and I can share that with all of you when it becomes available, that would be great. Thank you.
Quick question. Is it okay to ask a question through the chair? Do you have a list of who's rolling off? Can you make that available to us maybe on a separate cover?
Sure.
That'd be great. Thank you.
I think unless, and I think the rules are, I think Ryan and I roll off and can't stay, but the rules are that if Sal or Heather assumes a leadership position that they can't stay another year? Okay, so I think Sal.
There it is.
Yeah,
Heather,
I think it-
be
I
nice
think
serving
it's
with you
because
next year.
We all rolled on together, so I think that, yeah, so.
I never disagree with the judge, just as a matter of law. I don't ever disagree with judges.
That's
so
not what I
I'm-
hear, Sal.
Whatever your decision is fine with me.
Yeah, sadly, I think Ryan and I have to roll off. I looked to see if there's a way to stick around longer, but I don't think there is, which is sad.
We're gonna start an alumni group.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, yeah.
That actually, one of the things, I'll just sort of say this because as it sort of piggybacks on what Heather just said. But I attended a Cal Law meeting, and it was the first time that I really heard the background of how COAF came about. And when I sort of heard the backstory of all of that and the amazing people who have been on COAF before. And I when I was hearing this presentation, I actually texted Elizabeth and I said, part of the onboarding process of coming on COAF should be a little bit of history of how the COAF came to be and the way that, it came from, from all these stakeholders and the amazing people who have been here before. So hopefully that's something that we can do for the folks that are rolling on in 2023 is really talk about where we came from, and then we have this ability to form an alumni group, which I'll talk to Leah about later. But that would be amazing, because it is really an incredible group. Okay. Any other questions for Elizabeth about her report? All right, wait,
I was going to just, but I guess
yes,
I can
sure.
connect offline. Will you send out when those summer fellowships are available so that we can
Sure.
share it broadly across networks?
Of course.
Thank you.
That's great. Okay, unless anybody has anything else for Elizabeth about her report, we can move on to item 7.
Oh, there's a hand raised.
There is a hand.
Sorry, there's
Olga.
3 hands.
Yes, sorry, Olga.
Just a question about where you post your fellowship content. Do you have a standard place that's like a clearinghouse for these types of opportunities for students? Or is it just all pushed out through the personal networks?
That's a great question. And so I should probably clarify that the grants that the State Bar makes will be going to the legal aid organizations who will then distribute it to the student. And this grant is only available to those already State Bar funded legal aid organizations. So that's kind of, so we know, the answer to your question, although no, we don't have like a fellowship page on the State Bar website, but that's, but the opportunity is available to our current grantees.
Okay, we have several fellowships through CLA as well. And, you know, I'm new, so I'm still trying to figure out the logistics, but, you know, we don't have a standard way of pushing those out or even listing all of them comprehensively. And the other, so I thought maybe if there was a place that, you know, either we can create or collaborate with you to create so that students, regardless of where they are and who's in their network and what kind of social capital they have, that they can still at least see that these opportunities exist. So maybe that's something we can work on in the future.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And Heather, I see your hand.
Because we had previously discussed something like this, I feel like a couple years ago, like a resource page.
Yeah,
That links out.
and I believe the resource page, I think CLA does have a law student resource page, but perhaps we can focus in on.
How to market it.
I'll link that better.
If
We do have one. It's just not clear who knows about it, how it's accessed, whether it's
How it's updated.
Right. Yeah.
Not to prolong this discussion, but Olga, Heather, whoever's working on this, I'd love to collaborate with you on this. On the law school side, we have PICD, both Northern and Southern California, which is Public Interest Career Day. My assumption is that many of the organizations that recruit through that for law students are also State Bar funded organizations. And we encourage I know at least across all the Southern California law schools, we really encourage all of our 1Ls to participate in that. We try to create in them, like, at least your 1L summer, do something public interest minded, and whatever else you might do, this is a good foundation. So if we have that, I can both work with you on that resource page and collaborate with the law schools in making sure broadly we can use that as an encouragement for students to continue. And there's a space on the law school side that's already created. So it makes it a lot easier to distribute this information. And again, I believe the Southern California is mid-February, and I think the Northern California actual interview day is early March. We normally try to space them about 2 weeks apart. So I might be flipping when Southern and Northern are, but we try to have them about 2 weeks apart.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, that's a great thing that we should be working on. So thank you all for that. Thank you, Olga, for bringing that up too and asking the question. Okay. I think now we can move to item 7.1 on our agenda, which is to hear from Executive Director Leah Wilson on the strategic plan.
Great. I am so happy to be here today, and I apologize because I do have to step out for a bit after I finish this and have some discussion with you to hop into another sub-entity meeting that's happening today, but then I will be back. So what I wanted to do today was to go over with all of you the board's new 5-year strategic plan for the state bar, with a particular focus on those areas that I think will be of interest and relevance to COAF, and where I anticipate a lot of partnerships. Some of this is already reflected in your work plan. You're already working on a number of these initiatives, but this is really just my opportunity to give kind of a high-level overview. So let me go to what I want to present. All right. So the new strategic plan is structured around 4 broad goal areas: strengthening the attorney discipline system, enhancing access to and inclusion in the legal system, regulating the profession, and engaging partners. As a foundational principle, and this is new in this iteration of our strategic plan, we reflect a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Also new, you see here language about with respect to both its own operations and the legal profession itself. Heretofore, the state bar, at least very explicitly, has been focused on diversity of the legal profession. In this strategic plan, we're reflecting an intention around our commitment ourselves as an institutional employer. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So I'm not going to go through the whole plan with you. As I said, I'm going to kind of highlight areas in under each of the goals that I think are most relevant to your work. So goal 1, really about that attorney discipline system. Each of the goal areas is organized around strategies, the high-level strategies: effectiveness, consumer focus, DEI, and policy and systems change. Those strategies levels are consistent across each of the 4 goal areas. And so again, most of what I'm going to be showing you falls under the DEI strategy within each goal, but not all. So here under goal 1, this you all know, and I think have been wonderful thought partners around. This is the FARCUS work, DEI, looking at racial disparities in the attorney discipline system. And you know that there were a number of reforms that were recommended, not necessarily by Professor Farkas himself, but certainly by Professor Robertson, who we brought in after to develop recommendations. Not all of those reforms have been implemented, and not all of them are probably going to be implemented, but this is certainly continues to be an area of focus in the new strategic plan. Related here, you see reference to the ad hoc commission recommendations, and I see Sarah Good on my screen at least, and I thank her for her great work on that group. So this ad hoc commission has taken up some of the issues outlined in the Robertson recommendations. I will say that one of them is a funded pilot program for representation of respondents, pro per respondents in the state bar discipline system. So that recommendation will go forward to the board. I expect that to be a controversial recommendation. But again, that does flow ultimately from that FARCUS finding about the impact of lack of representation on disparities, racial disparities in disciplinary outcomes. So you can see here listed a whole host of activities: implicit bias training for decision makers at the bar. So we have implicit bias training for our staff, but we need to do something additional and different for those staff who are making key decisions. This refers to OCTC and state bar court staff. We also have these type of staff in admissions, the moral character investigator staff. So this is a different and specialized form of training. You can see here reference to our work on the reportable action bank matters, an issue elevated in the FARCUS study, an intention around developing a pro per practice guide for unrepresented respondents, and looking at the impact of what we have done around archiving closed complaints. Also really important, and I hope to see COAF very engaged in this, we will in 2024, okay, sorry, I'm going ahead of myself. In 2024, we will conduct basically FARCUS phase 2. FARCUS was completed in 2019. In 2024, we will be doing a follow-up because there were a number of activities that were implemented in response. It's a time to take a look and see where are we? Have we moved the needle? Have we made any progress? So that is something to look forward to in 2024. In addition, and this is what is reflected here, we want to look in this 2024 study slightly at more expansive view beyond just racial disparities, looking at some of the other issues that have come up, including just disciplinary disparities for solo and small firm practitioners. There is some intersection with race, but that's not all of the disparity that we see. So we'll be looking at that in the next study. And you can see some detail here in terms of the operational activity, looking at firm size, practice type. Are there other disparities that we're not aware of? So again, moving beyond race, but the solid foundation remaining, looking at racial disparities in the discipline system. So now I'll go to goal 2. This is the one that I think most clearly talks about inclusion, very central to your work, access and inclusion. Again, the goal is based on or underpinned by 4 strategies. The strategies are consistent. The narrative under each of the strategies is not. Let me try to get rid of my chat there. Okay. So we have here increasing the number of attorneys admitted through special admissions. And here you can see in the detail, further explaining this, a reference to the PLL program. So I included this. I'm not so sure that the rest of these items, the military spouse program, registered legal aid attorneys, I'm not sure if these are issues that have come your way, and Elizabeth certainly is well versed in them and can engage you on them. But for the PLL, I know that you have representation on the Blue Ribbon Commission on the bar exam. That commission has considered the question of a non-bar exam pathway to licensure. And for this PLL population, we recently submitted recommendations to the Supreme Court about what to do given the pending expiration of the program. And our state bar recommendation gave the court an option of creating a non-bar exam pathway to permanent licensure for remaining PLL. So because this is an issue that's been addressed by the Blue Ribbon Commission, I know it's something that you guys have talked about and aren't necessarily so supportive of. I did want to highlight that this is referenced in under goal 2 of the strategic plan. We also have another reference to the Blue Ribbon Commission. I know you've been briefed on it, but this has to do also with the exam. There has been a recommendation to develop a California-specific exam, moving away from our partnership with the National Conference and the multi-state. Over the course of this next couple of years, assuming the Supreme Court adopts the recommendation of the Blue Ribbon Commission, we would be looking at developing a whole new exam. So even if there was ever some movement towards a non-exam pathway, I don't see that being the sole option. So you'd be existing in an environment where there would be an exam and maybe a non-exam pathway. And I would hope that COAF would be or will be engaged with us in the development of the new California exam. I pause here just to note, for example, that my son is taking his medical school entrance exams right now. So different than the bar exam, but sort of like the LSAT. And there is a cultural competency component to that exam. There's a component where he's being asked to talk about how he's going to interact with patients of different backgrounds. And this kind of thing, we don't test at all in our bar exam. But when I talk about your participation and thinking through the new bar exam, or certainly even a new non-exam pathway, these are the kind of issues that I hope you would bring forward. Also, under goal 2, the annual report card on diversity in the profession. Elizabeth just referenced this year, there's a link. We are not doing the 100-question survey, but we will continue to do this work. We are also expanding this. If any of you go to inactive, you will see in the future, you will see that we have added questions to this inactive form. We're seeking to better understand why people choose to go inactive. The reason we're doing this is national data tells us that women are disproportionately more likely to go inactive, and women of color even more so, 8 to 10 years into practice. We can do that assessment in California, but we don't know the why. The questions that we've added to this survey tell us hopefully the why. So this is sort of another level deeper into the retention issues. And so you'll see that if you do happen to go inactive. We're also analyzing, as I said, the inactive data to give us some deeper visibility into what is happening with the population that's choosing to transfer to inactive status. Continue to work on our calls to action. I will say that this year's diversity report card was incredibly well received. That is the best publicity, certainly I've ever had since I've been at the bar. It was welcome, I have to admit, given that we're constantly being criticized. So, it was awesome. I hope we can continue to repeat it and build on it. I will tell you that we have presented the report card in a Power BI, not in an online report format, and there are embedded Power BI's many different ways to access the data, and we're frequently updating it. So soon, if not already, you'll be able to take a look at a county level view, hone in on certain geographic areas, hone in on certain populations of interest, and access data that is not immediately visible when you look at the face of the report. So I encourage you to keep taking a look at that. So in addition to looking at who's already in the profession, the strategic plan contemplates work on the pipeline. And here we're very focused, as you know, on those already in law school, focused on keeping them in law school and helping students pass the bar exam. So these are some of the strategies here that you can see on the screen: data supported practice that promote retention and advancement of a diverse and inclusive legal population. So what are we going to do? Number one, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we are, very often, and myself included, very focused on race and gender often. But here, we also want to look at our efforts to be inclusive vis-a-vis those who have disabilities, various kinds of disabilities. We are undertaking a very significant effort to overhaul our testing accommodations process. This is an effort not without some controversy. It's long overdue for the bar. But this is one aspect of our inclusion work that I think I myself don't always talk about. I think you all are familiar with our work around law school retention programs. We've been working hard to get the data for our California accredited and unaccredited schools that will allow us to look at attrition from law school by race for not just the ABA law schools in California, but the other law schools that we have here in our state. We also intend to get to a point, at some point where we can publish some guidelines for those metrics that we believe should be used by retention programs, identify best practices that actually work based on the data. So these are all some activities you can expect to see under the parameters of the current strategic plan. The Leadership Seal program, it's just so excited to have this launch in January. I'm sure that you guys are all very familiar with it, so I don't need to explain it to you. But what I will say here, and this goes back to the comment I made at the beginning about DEI as a foundational principle, not just for the state bar vis-a-vis the lawyers that we license, but also for the state bar as an employer. So what I want to highlight here is the state bar itself will be pursuing the Leadership Seal. We are going to be very public about our efforts. So on the State Bar web page that has the Leadership Seal information, we're going to have a little banner box that talks about where we are in our own progress, what our challenges are, our successes, etc. So that's something I wanted to highlight here. The Mindsets in Legal Education Initiative, hopefully you are all familiar with this. This is a strategy that has been proven to be beneficial to folks in helping them pass the bar exam. And when I say proven, it has met the gold standard of research, a random controlled assigned trial. And so what we're really wanting to do here is encourage, I'm going to put it here, we want to encourage more students to take advantage of this initiative, which the State Bar does offer with each administration of the bar exam. And we also will be looking to offer this for the first year law students exam, the quote unquote baby bar, in addition to the traditional bar exam. Another thing of interest, also in the admission space, we are looking at different, I call these modalities, administration modalities. For the bar exam, including remote testing and open book formats. The other item that's on here is giving people more time to take the bar exam. So those of you that are in law school, I think I heard some of you maybe work in law schools or have connections there. Very soon we'll be reaching out to law schools to talk about the studies that we are doing. We got some grant funding to study these different modalities. And really the question is, what is the impact of giving people more time of an open book? It's a very important question in my view, since the practice of law is open book. So we will begin testing those next year and see what the impact is on pass rates overall, but also on the performance for different populations. Implicit bias trainings for bar exam proctors and graders. I think hopefully you guys have been updated on that. And I know that you've been involved or receiving reports on efforts to diversify the exam development and grading pool. Law school student loan forgiveness, included this here because I do know that some of you have been involved working, I believe, with the Trust Fund Commission, maybe the Access Commission or a working group around in LRAP program. There was some hope that we would be able to get funding for this in the state budget. That did not come to pass, but you can see through this screen, one of the intentions now is to, and this effort is really being led by the Access Commission at this point, but is to try to self-fund an LRAP program focused on attorneys going into public interest. So I'm not sure the extent to which COAF will continue to be involved in that work, but I did want to highlight that here. And I think you will. Law school accreditation, this is my last one in the sort of admissions front here. Here we're really talking about some issues around our unaccredited schools. And this I think will be an interesting conversation that I will want to engage COAF in. You know, the unaccredited schools are often called our schools of opportunity. They are low cost. They at least in some circumstances have a more diverse population than the traditional law schools. But the bar pass rates for many of these schools are quite low. And there is, I think, a need for us to take a hard look at whether or not, from sort of a consumer protection standpoint, having a number of schools where folks are very unlikely to pass the bar exam, if this is good governance for us as an accreditor. So I think this will be a difficult set of conversations, particularly again, because the unaccredited schools are considered schools of opportunity. And this is a sort of project area that I would love to engage COAF in. Go a little bit more quickly here. Goal 3, regulating the profession. What I want to indicate here is that some of you are aware, hopefully most of you, that the state bar used to include our sections and sort of our membership association components until 2018. 2018, the legislature imposed a divorce on the state bar, and the state bar itself is the regulatory agency, the California Lawyers Association, more of the membership trade association. I bring that up to say that when we had our divorce, the state bar, I think, swung very extremely to one side of the pendulum in terms of a regulation versus support. We created a hard line And we said, we're the regulators, we don't support lawyers. For example, we don't call licensees members anymore, they're licensees. CLA has members, so making that distinction. What goal 3 really recognizes is that we swung that pendulum too far, that in supporting lawyers to be competent and ethical, you are protecting the public and you are being an effective regulator. And so that's kind of the heart and spirit behind goal 3. So here you see a particular focus on supporting attorneys who may have unique practice management and other challenges. I think here we're really going to see a lot of solo practitioners, rural practitioners, people who are fairly isolated and have some unique challenges. We also want to look at competency-related factors that drive disparate voluntary departures from the legal profession by race and gender. I mentioned that we are adding these questions to the inactive form. We are going to analyze data, and this is in that vein that we want to look at really why are folks leaving and what can we do to help support them in staying. I think there's a couple of slides that I could have added, but I want to particularly call out something that I think Ryan himself has championed, and this is the imposter syndrome, and creating some resources on our webpage to address feelings of to address imposter syndrome. And we are doing that. So under this whole rubric of goal 3, we are developing a resource page on our website. We will certainly have a dedicated focus on imposter syndrome, but also areas that we see from the data are really a sort of underlying either disparate departures to inactive status or disparate discipline. You will start to see specific resources being built up in those areas. So lastly, goal 4. This is not DEI specific necessarily, but I want to highlight it here because it does have to do with how the State Bar intends to operate vis-a-vis the public and its various committees and the board. And your chair referenced the new public comment guidelines at the beginning of the meeting. That's sort of part of this intense work we're doing under goal 4. So 1, enhance visibility and accessibility to State Bar meetings. You will see a lot is being done to standardize the experience at State Bar meetings. I've got a long list of what we're doing here, but we've adopted new procedural rules, moving away from Roberts, which is this, many inches thick and very few people can access it. The board has adopted Rosenberg's. Rosenberg's is 10 pages. Rosenberg's will apply not just to the board, but to all committees. We've adopted public comment guidelines that are intended to, again, give a universal experience of interacting with the State Bar and its committees, and open access both before meetings and during meetings. So you can see a host of activities listed here in that spirit. We also, under goal 4, have an explicit charge of serving as an incubator for innovation and sharing our successes. And I'm highlighting this one when I talk to different sub-entities because I want you to know that we are looking to you to lift up areas of your work as a committee or things you've seen the State Bar do that you think are worthy of being elevated and sort of highlighted. I think sometimes, again, hearkening back to my earlier comments, we are so often beleaguered and criticized as an organization, primarily for our discipline system, that we forget to focus on our successes and what we are doing well. So I ask you to kind of think about that. I was skipping ahead to see, yes, this reference to our 100th anniversary. 2027 is the State Bar's 100th anniversary. Leading up to that, we will be doing quite a bit of work to highlight the changes that have happened and our accomplishments. So again, I just ask you to start putting that in your mind and thinking about that as we move ahead. Also in goal 4, a lot of intentionality around creating and sustaining partnerships with other entities. The State Bar has been somewhat isolated, I'd say, and very focused on partnerships with other legal organizations. So here the board is saying Yes, we want to maintain and continue partnerships with legal organizations, but we also need to be partnering with other types of entities, namely community-based organizations, advocacy organizations outside of the legal space, because that will help maximize our impact. So again, as you're working and focusing on particular issues, I would ask you to think about what organizations might we learn from, partner with, or work with to help maximize our impact, and think outside of just bar associations or sort of the traditional partners for the state bar, not to minimize their importance, but that really is the intention here behind this particular strategy. You can see a lot listed here that I'm not going to go over with you. Demonstrate transparency. This is another one that I want to highlight. Hopefully you all are aware that we recently disclosed information about hundreds of complaints against Tom Girardi that the State Bar did not take action on for many years. I bring that up here because it is reflective of the emphasis on transparency that is documented in this strategic plan. So again, it is a value, sort of an organizational value, that I ask all of you as committee members, subcommittee members, to also demonstrate in your work. And I'm sure that you already do, but I want to just say that the State Bar is kind of doubling down on being transparent, even when the information that we are being transparent about is not necessarily positive or flattering for the organization. Expanding multilingual content and outreach, also under goal 4. Engaging diverse voices in the development and evaluation of State Bar policy. So again, this is really looking at two things. One is the number of non-lawyers that we have on various sub-entities. The board is now very focused on maximizing the number of non-lawyers to the extent authorized by rule or statute. We have many sub-entities where we've had fewer public members, non-lawyer members than is authorized. The board has pushed staff hard to put as many public members as possible on the various sub-entities. So that's something that you may or may not experience. The other area where this is coming out is in our public comment process. So not the comment that I was referencing earlier, people to come to your meeting and make comment, but rather when we put rules out for public comment. There is a real intention now around trying to get true consumers and the public to weigh in. That means you try to use plain language to explain what this rule is about. You advertise on social media, you create surveys that are sort of accessible and engaging, and not just put up a 20-page agenda item on a website and hope that the public is going to wade through it and comment. So these are some changes that you should have already seen and should expect to see. And I think that was long, but that is it. So that's our strategic plan. Hopefully there's a number of areas there that you recognize, are familiar with, already working on, reflected in the work plan. And this gives you a good sense of sort of where the bar is intending to go over the next 5 years.
Thanks, Leah. I mean, obviously a ton of work has gone into that, and we're super appreciative of all the work that's gone in and all the focus on DEI efforts that go all the way through it. Do folks have questions for Leah about any of the stuff that they heard?
Sal has his hand raised.
Sal?
Yes, my hand's been raised the whole time. I'm so tired.
I'm sorry.
I'm just kidding. I'm teasing. It's just a cartoon thing up there. It's all right. Let me lower it. Let me thank Leah. That was tremendous. Great presentation, very clear, concise, and obviously a lot of work. So my questions are not designed to besmirch all that work. It's just designed to get more clarification. So against that background, let me start asking you. There was a lot of things, and I was trying to write them all down. When you first started talking about, the efforts in diversity and inclusion, it sometimes it feels like there's a lot of emphasis placed on law schools, which is okay. I don't have any problem with that because we should, but it seems that that's really one clear half of the problem. The other half being everybody that employs lawyers after that, which is really the greater weight because we are in a sense here in this group trying to promote diversity among lawyers and judges, et cetera, in the state, not so much diversify the law schools, although that is the feeder into it. So my question is this, is how does the state propose to address some of the requirements or hiring practices? And I know we can't get into private practices and things of that sort and what companies do, but how does the state address the issue that law schools can do all they can to promote diversity and prepare everybody ready to go, but then when they get out there to find jobs, they come up against institutionalized racism, institutionalized discrimination, prejudices, legacy misconstruing because people have beliefs about certain law schools versus other. How do we address that so that we start to dissipate all these crazy things that are happening? Because I mentor a lot of students in my law school, and they all come up with the same kind of problems where they can't get past a recruiter at the firm or a company, or they can't get past because they're not from the right law school, or they're not with the right pedigree, or they don't have the right people in their background. So that's one question, is what is the state doing to address that whole problem that has persisted for decades? We can't seem to get over that. Second question. Oh, do you want me to? I have like 3 questions. I don't know how you want me to do it. Do you want me to stop there or give you all of them?
Yeah, go ahead. Give me all of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then the other question I have is there's a great effort, and I applaud the efforts that the state's making, because it was a way to get this group really, on its rails and off and going. But there's a lot of words that are used about we're going to try, we're going to encourage, we're going to really promote. What are the exact numbers? Like, for example, does the state say, and I'll use the one that's pertinent to my community, where you have what almost more than 50, maybe 60% of the population in California is Latino, but only 5 to 6% of those are lawyers. So when you look at a number like that, does the state bar say, you know what, we're going to make that number by 2025, we're going to make that number 6% to 11% and give a definitive number? Is there such a number? And if so, what happens? What's the remedy if you don't make it? And I'll give you an example. At my company at Equinix, they've instituted this new rule now where the vice presidents have to carry a DIE component to their management. And if they don't meet the metrics that they're given every year, their bonuses are adversely impacted. They either don't get the full bonus or they get a percentage of it chopped off, because that is the way they're what we call putting teeth to it, right? So I'm curious about that. And then the last question, I apologize for all the questions here, but the last question is, with respect to the entirety of the DIE movement, what are we doing specifically about addressing the pay gaps, specifically for women versus men, and even more specifically for Latina women who make 54 cents to every dollar a white male makes in corporate America, but in law, I don't know if we have a concerted effort where we really are going to attack the pay gaps that are affecting not only minorities in general, but specifically women. Thank you for listening and indulging me, and I apologize for the length of the questions.
No, they're very helpful. What I wanted to share with you in the diversity report card, and I know that Elizabeth, is much more expert on this than I, but the diversity report card includes these calls to action. These are specifically for employers. So although the strategic plan is really focused on certainly what I highlighted, a lot of admissions focus, the early pipeline, and retention in the profession. It is here that we start talking about what employers need to be doing. And we have sector specific, much more detailed calls to action. Those calls to action now have translated into the Leadership SEAL program. So there are 10 components of that program. And in order to achieve varying levels of the SEAL status, you have to commit to doing anywhere from 7 to, I think, all 10. But again, I'm probably butchering it. Elizabeth can clarify. So this is our first foray into accountability. But I will say this, our ability to hold anybody accountable is quite limited because we regulate individual lawyers. The State Bar does not have entity regulation power. We don't regulate any law firms. We don't regulate any
Right.
legal employers. So our ability is one of a carrot. It is not one of a stick. So again, what are we going to do about this very significant underrepresentation of Latinos in the profession? It's shocking, when you look at the data. There's not much we can do in the terms of, if you don't meet the target, who is the you? The you is the entire universe of, both that early pipeline, who's in law school, who's passing the bar exam, there's so many yous that need to be held accountable for that.
Sure.
And we aren't quite in that position. The same thing around pay. What I would say, and Elizabeth, I can't remember the specifics of what the leadership seal talks about in terms of compensation. I think it says to be transparent about compensation, which is now state law.
Yeah, and to review and to make sure it's market rate.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I think that being transparent about it, which again is now state law, is going to help. I don't think it's the whole answer, but when you don't know, it's hard for you to advocate for yourself. So I don't think these answers are satisfying necessarily, but I'm trying to.
No, that helps a lot, and thank you. And I think that the leadership seal is the right kind of thinking, because I mean, we're all attorneys here in the legal profession, and if there's one thing I think we all have threaded commonly among us is we're all very competitive. Everybody's very competitive. I work at this law firm and we did this, and I work at that law department, we did that, and that leadership seal program, I don't want to say it should be used that way, but that's sort of as I see it, it's like if that became the kind of elegant seal that a law firm could proudly wear on its website, saying, look at what we're doing on DIE initiatives, and we're ahead of the game. And we're talking about a group of students coming out of law school, these next gen students. They're asking different questions in interviews. It's no longer about how much I'm going to get paid, what am I going to do? It's about how socially conscious are you? What do you do for the community? How are you giving back to the community? What kind of efforts can I make to help the community? It's a very socially conscious generation. And they will look for things like the seal, if that's the way, I hope I'm not misinterpreting it, but if they're looking for things like that, that would be a good way where you don't have to control the private sector, but giving them that kind of recognition makes them all want to compete for it in a healthy way, where they're saying, we're going to do it so that it's permanent and we get the seal and it says something. And I think that's one way to do that. And then you could bring under the umbrella of that seal all these kinds of things that we've talked about that you've addressed, like diversity hiring. Something I think that was very poignant you said too was how we're helping students after law school, because a lot of students get out of law school and everything stops. And a lot of them don't have money for the bar review aids and all the bar study stuff, and they're just done. They have no money. So if a law firm in the legal industry starts to address those things as well as everything else I mentioned in the pay gap, and that gets them a seal from the state bar that says this is the kind of legal practice we need and try to achieve, I think that would go a long way into addressing some of these problems.
All right.
Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Sal. Those were great comments. Thank you. Sarah, and then Heather. You're muted, certainly.
Yeah, so this one's easy, actually, Leah. I just wanted to congratulate you on a really impressive presentation. And I'm aware of a bunch of these projects, but not all of them. And when you put them all together, wow, it is really mind-blowing. All of the different aspects of the waterfront that the State Bar is covering on this issue. No other bar is doing this kind of work. And so I just wanted to kind of applaud the bar and thank you for that great presentation. To Sal's point, just to follow up on that a little bit, metrics and seals and certifications all, are designed to incentivize various employers, whether it's corporate, private firm, nonprofit, whatever, to move in the right direction. But, ultimately the goal is for diverse attorneys to feel included in a sense of belonging as a result of all of that. And that is much tougher to sort of capture and kind of encourage people to kind of move there. So metrics are great. but really DEI is really about so much more than that. And particularly feeling included and belonging. So that's all. Thanks so much.
I agree with you, and I would say the SEAL program has one element about, and again, Elizabeth can correct me, but I believe this might be one of the mandatory elements to survey your staff. And the survey component is attempting to get at that sense of belonging and inclusion. So not just do we have, parity from a numbers perspective, but how do people feel? And I know for us as an employer, our own annual engagement survey will be modified to include more questions that get at this particular issue of belonging. So I agree with you.
Yeah, one quick comment and Sarah, thank you for that. Yeah, it's very clear to me, obviously, that that's really only the first layer in many layers that it takes to get there. And I guess it's a little bit of my fault for not explaining or being more explanatory in what I'm getting at is that I think I'm trying to be very diplomatic about this. The absence of diversity is in part what creates the lack of inclusion and the lack of people feeling they belong. That's what's the problem. If you included more, there's a natural phenomenon that happens because you're bringing in communities that have this as part of their culture. When I was growing up, all the things we teach now to people and EQ skills about empathy and communication and inclusivity, that's all stuff that I was told when I was a kid. And I'm not trying to say anything bad or negative about anybody else's, but it's part of my cultural DNA. So to me, it's a very natural thing. But that's why I see it as, if we started to at least have people think about, you got to include and you got to do this, the effects of that is everything else starts coming in. So I do understand that the monikers of a label or a sign or a number is only a signpost of good things, but the reality is when you start bringing in good things do come from it.
Think so. Heather, and Leah, you might want to get a pencil because Heather said she had 7 questions.
It's now 8, but
And now it's 8.
it's really so, and I don't know if is this the appropriate time to respond to everything Leah
Yes.
said? Okay.
100%.
So, and really this is just not to solve right now, but to have it on the recording so we can all go back to it and revisit it, at the appropriate time. But Leah, amazing presentation. Thank you so much. I hope I can read my own notes. I was writing down so much. It was so packed with so much amazing information. But so thank you so much for that and everything that you all are doing so far. I'm just going to run through a bunch of things. They're not even all questions. They're just kind of thoughts. On the California specific exam, as we think about that, I think I recall from when I took the exam all those many years ago that the performance piece of it seemed very geared to law firm practice. And as we think about something California specific, I'd encourage us to think about performance exam pieces that are more public interest or in-house based, because even some of the open book statement that you said, I mean, in my practice, you have to be able to retain that information and think on your feet very quickly. And I don't have a law librarian right next to me. So even the nuances of where you're practicing and what those skill sets might entail might be interesting to just keep in mind as we think about a California specific designed one. The cultural competency element, which I love, I think that's amazing. Would we then require law schools to have a complementary cultural competency course that is a bar course, like the rest of, contracts, etc., if it's going to be a piece of an exam? I think that's really necessary and would have been very helpful when I was in law school for people to have to take something like that. One question I did have, on the inactive status information you were telling us, you said, we note that there's more inactive status with women of color and I didn't capture what the other group was.
It's women and then women of color specifically.
Okay.
Within that, women more than men, women of color more than white women.
Okay, thank you for that. I love that for the Leadership Seal program, which I'm on the committee for, that the State Bar itself is pursuing it. I think showing that by example, being very transparent in that process is excellent, and I just want to applaud that. On the Mindsets and Legal Education Initiative, I'm not familiar with that, so can we have an agenda one time where we kind of
Yes.
walk through that? Okay, so I just want to request that. The law school accreditation and the unaccredited schools, if we put together a committee on that, I'd like to volunteer to be part of that. Especially as we think about coining them or referring to them as schools of opportunity. Are we tracking what the opportunity is? I think how we're defining that, I think is interesting, because to your point, that if people aren't passing the bar and then can't pursue a career in this space or have a barrier to that, then was the opportunity only to get to go to a school where they paid a lot of money and didn't get the end result out of it? Like, I think we have to really think and scrutinize what the actual opportunities are that people get from going to those schools. That's number 5, so we're moving right along. On 6 is the 100th anniversary, which I'm really excited about. I'm wondering if we're already thinking about a marketing budget and a social media budget, because we can do all this great work, and if the kids can't find us, if people aren't aware of it. So a lot of what I think is missing in just ensuring that the public knows all the great things that we're doing that you just listed out is because there's just not enough publicity around it outside of not just at the bar, in the places where the bar shows up, but really in public spaces, TikTok and all those kinds of places where young people are now spending their time. So I just want us to start thinking about that kind of early on. Number 7 on the more accessibility and transparency for the public to see kind of operationally what we're doing. Maybe we can think about having some weekend town halls. This meeting takes place in the middle of people's workday. If we want to make sure the public can join and hear us, we might need to do some quarterly or annually or semi-annual meetings on a weekend where people can have access. And number 8 was when you said, who is the you, as we addressing Sal's question about what do we do to encourage people to get the leadership seals and the sense of belonging at the firms. I think all of us are the you. And so as we think about the leadership seal, I'm thinking also maybe some element of who in your company or firm is helping you get the seal, so that there's some visibility into, like, it can't just be one person or 5 people. It really needs to be ingrained in everybody's responsibilities every day. That's the only way you're going to create belonging in any environment. And so if, like, you've got 1,000 lawyers and only 5 of them are pushing you, got you to the seal, that's still, there's an issue there. But if we can say, 50%, 75% of our lawyers daily are working, or weekly are encouraging this in some way, I think that's something we want to capture. So I tried to talk fast so we could get through them all. But again, not for response today, but for food for thought as we, as you work towards the strategic plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think you guys are going to be great partners.
We got lots of ideas. Yes, we got lots of ideas. Okay, thank you, Heather. And Shalak has lots of ideas too.
Yes, but I only have 2 brief comments and or questions. One is to say, Leah, I'm the person earlier that was talking about working with law schools. And I want to say, in my work with the law schools, I want to echo what Sarah and Sal, and I think Heather also said, that we have not seen that any other state bar is putting out this level of transparency around diversity in the legal profession, which matters to the students who are in the law school, to Sal's point. So I just want to applaud you, Leah, your leadership, the work that, whether it's, oh my God, Elizabeth, I'm staring at you and your name went blank. Elizabeth and her team and others have done to really move this forward. And I know, and we all know from our own work, that when you do that work, as the kids would say, shots get fired. And so I want to also applaud you all for sometimes taking the principled stance, which can be hard. To that, I have a question, which might be a food for thought question, but I'm wondering the extent to which the state bar and state bars collaborate with each other and with accreditors. So for example, Heather raised, whether there should be a cultural competency requirement on the bar going forward, as you had mentioned, Leah, being in the MCAT. And my mind immediately went to, well, the ABA has a requirement now for law schools. So are there partnership opportunities, whether it's with the ABA for ABA accredited schools, other state bars where a bit more of a consensus can be built, although each is its own independent regulating agency and obviously operates differently, but there will not be movement nationally around any of these issues when we operate in silos. It just doesn't work, right? And to that, I'm wondering if there is also the opportunity for more collaboration and removing some of the classism that exists in the legal profession when we think about accrediting agencies and we think unaccredited, Cal accredited, and so on. And the fact that while it's important that those are seen as schools of opportunity, I am sure others do, my school has for 5 years offered the For People of Color Conference, which targets students, potential law students who are of color, as it says, and often first gen. And one of the hard pieces of advice that we have to tell them is, while it is much more expensive, if you can get into an ABA accredited school, that's where you need to go. Because regardless of where it's ranked, you'll have more employment opportunities later. And it's a hard thing to say when we also know the burden of debt, the pay gap, the fact that pay gap combined with debt. From my institution, the average student is graduating with $197,000
That's under average.
in loan
Yeah.
debt. That's just for law school.
Right.
That's not combining their undergraduate debt. It's something that keeps me and Dardine up at night, right? And you put that across schools, we are now projecting that there will be anywhere from a 5 to 9% tuition increase at all California ABA accredited schools next academic year. And when you think that that means that at some of the schools, tuition alone is going to go from approximately $74,000 to just 80 just for tuition. People still have to live, and I don't know if this is a requirement at the Cal or unaccredited. Certainly at ABA accredited schools, we do not permit first year students to work at all.
Well, that's the difference, I think, is that they allow
Yeah.
that, so.
And so I'm putting this out there as a sobering number about what is it that causes people of color to fall out. And so I'm hopeful that when we think about, partnerships with the public, but also with each other, that to remove some of that classism, we can really think about the impact on the people who are coming out with that. And my final, just kidding, on it is, I don't know, I'm assuming, because I know the great people who work at the State Bar have probably thought of this, so preaching choir, but I'm hopeful that at least a couple of the questions on that transition to inactive are questions that address belonging and the extent to which people are choosing to move out of practice, not just because of familial obligations, but because they have said, this is not a place where I belong and it's frankly not worth it anymore to do this. And I think that's important. And to the extent that you all can encourage law schools to include that type of questioning in attrition, I think is really helpful. The extent to which belonging impacts academic and voluntary attrition at the law school level will be important. And to that, coming to partnerships, you all might consider partnering with Leslie. I'm happy to forward information to Elizabeth, because their annual law school survey has fantastic questions around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and why reinvent the wheel if there are questions that already exist.
And I think going forward that once we get the data on inactive, that's an area that COAF will want to really look at, right? Because if we're talking about access and inclusion, and we're talking about getting, more diverse people in the profession, if we can't keep them and we're not doing what we need to do to keep them, then we're not actually moving the needle.
I'm sorry, I just want to add to that, that's something that, as I study and work on this at the law school level, that does become troubling, is that as Sal noted, sort of nationally, the numbers for Black, Latinx, Asian American attorneys, Indigenous attorneys have, if they've increased, it's been by about 1 to 2% in the past 20 years nationally. Let's note, however, that the law school enrollment numbers for those groups have dramatically increased, which means that the issue is, while there is a pipeline issue and we work very hard on that, it is not only a pipeline issue. You should not be graduating 14% Hispanic attorneys and only have nationally in the profession a 7%. The day that I decide to actually enroll in that doctoral program, that is my position of focus, right? But what's happening to those missing percentages? And I think the state bar is uniquely positioned to do review on that.
And Leah, I know that you need to leave.
Yes, so I'm sorry, I'm getting pinged about, why are you supposed to be over here in this Zoom? So
I'm
I
sorry.
just so appreciate all
We'll
the
keep talking without
engagement.
you.
Yeah, and I'll come back a little bit later, see what you guys are talking about, but I can certainly come back to another meeting as well. Thank you all. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Leah.
Thanks, Leah.
I think.
And Novella, Novella, your hand is right over the recording button is right on top of your hand. So I just leaned over and I said, is her hand up? Yes. Okay, go ahead, Novella.
Yeah, I'm also interested in the data about women and women of color attorneys becoming inactive. And I wonder if there are professions that don't have that problem. And then I also wonder, just from the partnership point that Leah made, and then even within the legal profession, it seems like we're going to get limited data if we're only asking the attorneys who stuck around, as opposed to really digging in and having those conversations with the women attorneys and women of color attorneys who've become inactive as to why. And I think Sal's point about like legal employers trying with their DEI efforts is resonated with me, because I think a lot of times we go in with like good intentions, but then I contrast that with like the level of rigor that the state bar took to examining how to improve inequitable disciplinary practices, and also that research about changing the mindset of students when they're taking exams, and just how that was more than just good intentions, like that was a rigorous approach to addressing the problem. And so I hope that that same level of rigor can be applied to the inactive attorney issues.
Thanks, Novella. Sarah, I see your hand, and then after Sarah, well, Sarah, you had your hand up. You still want to say something? Okay. And Stephanie, I see your hand. I know that Kathy Ongiri is here from the Office of Professional Competence, and I don't know if she has to leave, so I don't want to not have Kathy make her presentation. So Sarah and then Stephanie, can we hold off yours until after Kathy? Does that work? Yes. Okay, great. Okay. Thanks, Stephanie. I appreciate that. Go ahead, Sarah.
So super quick, I just wanted to mention, Novella, that the ABA Commission on Women in the Profession has issued a lot of really comprehensive reports about retention of women and diverse women in the profession that provides, a lot of data and statistics applicable, nationally. So anyway, just wanted to put that out there, and that's it.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Kathy Ongiri, thank you so much for being so patient. It's nice to see you. I know you have a presentation for us here on Rule 9.7. And I appreciate it. Go ahead.
Thank you for having me today. And if Stephanie wants to go ahead and have her comment, I would need to cut off the conversation right at the end when there's one last hanging. I can say that's good if you want to go ahead, Stephanie.
Okay. I mean, Stephanie, I didn't know how long your comment was, but.
Oh, no worries. I was just going to really briefly say, in terms of for the inactive
members. I don't know what it is on the current State Bar website, but I remember many years ago when I was thinking about going inactive, I think it just, lets you do it and then you pay the lower fee and you get listed as inactive, but maybe it's something as easy as putting in like a little check mark saying if you want to answer some questions additionally, if we're trying to gather data about why people are thinking about going inactive.
So I just want to clarify, Stephanie, that I think if you go inactive now, there is a survey attached to
Okay,
the
perfect.
going inactive process.
Okay, perfect.
Good, that's good to know. Okay, thanks, Stephanie. Appreciate that. Kathy, thank you so much for your patience again.
No, thanks so much for having me today. So I'm just going to share my screen. And let me go to the slide.
There's a bit of an echo. I'm not sure if somebody needs to mute themselves. But go ahead, Kathy.
Is there still an echo?
There is, it wasn't the first time you started speaking, but now there is. I'm not sure why.
No, I heard the echo from the start too, so I don't know if you have a different, you're not on another, like on a phone too, right?
No.
Could just be a Zoom thing. That's okay. We can hear you fine though.
Okay. If it gets to be distracting, then maybe I can leave and come back. I'm not sure. I don't know.
Yeah, it's distracting to me. It's a pretty significant echo.
Oh, no. Okay. Give me a, let me leave and come back.
Yeah, that second time around was a little tough.
How do I sound now?
Perfect. That's good.
Okay. Look at
Much
technology.
better. Thanks, Kathy.
Okay. Now, I'm gonna start. Okay, can everybody see my screen okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. So today I'm going to talk to you about the attorney civility and the proposed amendments to the MCLE rules, the rule of court rule 9.7, and the rules of professional conduct. So what I'm going to do is provide an overview of the California Civility Task recommendations, discuss proposed revisions, as I mentioned, to the State Bar rules, the rules of professional conduct, and Rule 9.7. And I think the really important thing to note is that this stuff has been issued for public comment. So we would really, really encourage your public comments on this, spread the word, let people know that these things are out and are being considered, and let's dive into it. So the Civility Task Force was a joint project between the California Judges Association and the California Lawyers Association. And in September 2021, they issued a report that was titled Beyond the Oath, Recommendations for Improving Civility. Now, in the report, they found that incivility increases stress and job dissatisfaction among lawyers and judges, cost and delays in litigation and legal transactions, thereby increasing the cost for the public. Additionally, the report noted that incivility can be a manifestation of bias. So in order to kind of address these issues that the report found, they made three main recommendations that affect attorneys. The fourth recommendation is specific to judicial officers. And the recommendations that are directed to the attorneys are requiring 1 hour of MCLE civility training, revising the rules of professional conduct to address incivility, and require all lawyers to take the civility pledge. Now, let me walk you through each of those things. Now, currently, in terms of the MCLE requirements, currently licensees are required to take 25 hours of MCLE credit every 36 months. And of those requirements, you have to do 4 hours of legal ethics, 2 hours of recognition and elimination of bias, and 1 hour that's specific to implicit bias, and 1 hour of competency issues, and that's substance abuse or other issues impairing a licensee. Now, in terms of the proposed MCLE requirements, we looked at the civility report, and we also kind of looked at the other requests we've received from stakeholders and looking at kind of all of the different requirements. So that's how you'll see that there's a few other requirements that popped up. And I would be happy to answer questions on those as well, but today we're going to be focusing on the civility aspect of it. So in terms of the proposals to change those requirements, it would still have the 4 hours of legal ethics, the 2 hours of the recognition and elimination of bias with the 1 hour of implicit bias. We did request that there will be 2 hours of competency issues. So that would be 1 hour of the prevention and detection. But some of our stakeholders noted that that's kind of focusing on the wrong end of it. So it would be really great if we could get lawyers before they get to substance abuse problems or mental health issues. So that would expand that. Also, there was we have a request for 1 hour of technology in the practice of law, and then the 1 hour of civility. So I think it's really important to note here that it wouldn't increase the total of the 25 hours, but it would increase the requirements. So currently you have 7 hours of requirements. If the proposals go into effect, it would be 10 of those 25 hours. So let me just move on. There's one more thing about the MCLE changes that we have out for public comment, and that's giving credit for mock trial and moot court activities. So at the proposal would grant credit for coaching students that serve as scorers or presiding judges. And it would be at the high school level, the collegiate level, and the law school level. Currently, you can get theirs under a different section. There is credit at the law school level and under the teaching, but this would really expand it and allow for people to claim up to 2 hours of general credit during a compliance period. And they wouldn't be able to receive credit for grading papers or briefs and could not claim for prep time. And this one would not be eligible to combine with other credits of the required areas that I just mentioned, like the competency, the legal ethics, recognition of elimination of bias, and then the technology and civility if those ones go into effect. So now I'm going to talk about the changes specifically to civility. So here we have the rules of professional conduct, rule 1.2, and this rule addresses the allocation of authority within an attorney-client relationship. And so what this says is that notwithstanding a client's direction, a lawyer retains the authority to agree to reasonable requests of opposing counsel to do not prejudice the rights of clients, be punctual in fulfilling all professional commitments, avoid offensive tactics, and treat all persons involved in the legal process with dignity, courtesy, and integrity. So this is really stating that the lawyer retains that kind of that ability to direct those things in terms of representation. Next up is the proposed amendment to our misconduct rule. It's 8.4, and the proposed change would be that the comments clarify that civility is consistent with zealous advocacy. Now, the change that is mentioned here, it provides that professional misconduct is engaging in conduct that's prejudicial to the administration of justice. And what this rule does is it also cross-references a proposed new standalone rule that addresses incivility. So let me show you those comments quick. Now, in terms of the misconduct rule, comment 6 provides that a violation of paragraph D includes engaging in significantly unprofessional conduct that is abusive or harassing in the practice of a law or related professional activity. Now, it does say that a lawyer does not violate the paragraph by standing firm in their position of the client, protecting the record for subsequent review, or preserving professional integrity. And then the comment refers lawyers to consult the current California attorney guidelines of civility and professionalism, and then other applicable civility authorities. So that's a change to the misconduct rule. And then the Board of Trustees put out for public comment. This is the new rule, and it's 8.4.2. And it would prohibit incivility that includes behavior that is significantly unprofessional conduct, that is abusive or harassing, and it would be determined on surrounding facts and circumstances. Now, this would prohibit the engaging in civility in practice of law, related professional activities, and before in a tribunal. And so next, on terms of the comments to this one, again, it directs attorneys to consult the California Attorney Guidelines of Civility and Professionalism. It describes conduct that would not violate the rule. It indicates that a violation of this rule may also violate the misconduct rule that I mentioned earlier. And then it also clarifies that it does not apply to conduct protected by the First Amendment. Now, what this new rule does, it attempts to strike a balance between the task force belief that there needs to be a rule, instead of just changing comments to the rules. And they wanted to make sure that they got the concerns related to the First Amendment issues, interpretation and enforcement out of the considered. So next up, I'm going to talk about the proposed amendments to Rule of Court 9.7. So since 2014, the attorney oath contains the civility language. Okay, so as an officer of the court, I will strive to conduct myself at all times with dignity, courtesy, and integrity. So approximately, so this has been since 2014. So I want you to think about, when were you barred? Did you take the oath with the civility aspect?
Nope.
Yeah, it was this after I was barred. So, and here's the stats that kind of show where we're at as a state. So we have approximately 237,000 licensees. 150,000 of them are active, and they all took the oath without that civility language. So approximately 48,000 licensees have taken it with the civility language. So that's kind of the attorney population since 2014. So what the changes to this rule would do would include that by February 1st, 2024, the licensees who did not take the oath with the civility language and specially admitted attorneys must submit a declaration with the civility pledge language. And then there would be an annual requirement to take the civility pledge when you do pay your licensing fees or the registration fees. So that's all I have to present to you today. Are there any questions? And I'll stop sharing my screen so we can see everybody. Are there any questions? No.
I had a quick one. Great presentation, by the way, Kathy. There was talk before from Leah talking about that there's a school of thought about allowing people to become licensed. I can't remember the exact words, but not having taken the bar. So let's say we have a group of individuals that are now part of the state bar who are licensed to practice law. Will they also be required to take this same pledge, or is this only for licensed bar members?
That's a great question, and I'm not I'm not sure of the answer, so I don't want to give you the wrong answer. I do have the head of the Office of Professional Competence on the line. Randy, are you aware of that, the answer to that question?
So if there is an alternative path to licensed practice, I think that would have to be solidified in terms of what it involves in terms of the admissions process for that. And similar to the policy decision that appears to be made, at least with regard to the public comment proposal for special admission attorneys, some similar affirmation of a civility standard may be considered for them as well. But until we actually know what that alternative path is and how it works, I think we can't say for sure.
Sure.
But the current policy and the current public comment proposal indicates that it is going beyond the normal licensing.
And just, you know, so we're clear, there is no, right now, there's no non-exam pathway to licensure. There are the provisionally licensed folks during COVID, and there's the State Bar has presented a report to the Supreme Court, and one of the recommendations is to allow those provisionally licensed folks to gain permanent licensure without an exam, but that's one of like 4 or 5 options that are out there. So my guess is, Sal, that the civility pledge, if this passes, would apply to everyone, regardless of how you.
That's what, okay, yeah, that's good.
That's my
Thank you.
guess. Yeah.
Like I said, I
Ryan?
don't disagree with judges, so I agree.
Stop. Ryan and then Stephanie.
Thanks, Judge Kristen. I just had a couple of comments. So I serve on the Civility Task Force, and I was part of putting this recommendation together, and I firmly stand behind it. As a litigator and trial attorney, I have personally experienced engaging with opposing counsel and opposing counsel demonstrating absolutely reprehensible conduct. And frankly, they just think they'll get away with it, that no one really cares. And so this is a step in the right direction to make sure that we act appropriately and accordingly with our position as officers of the court and as leaders in our society generally. So thank you, Kathy, for your presentation.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Ryan, for your work on that too. Stephanie.
Hi, Kathy. I had 2 questions, I guess, or points. One is I'm at the Attorney General's office, and some of us are exempt from MCLE requirements. So I just want to make sure that those, maybe you guys covered it, those who are exempt still would be having to take the pledge, the renewed licensees.
Yes. Yeah, you have to do it with your licensing. So regardless of the MCLE compliance, you would still have to reaffirm the pledge on an annual basis.
Okay. And then I'm also just separately curious. I think you showed us that statistic where since 2014 admittees or licensees do take the pledge. Has there been any kind of data in terms of the younger attorneys being more civil? I mean, I could see older attorneys kind of being a little more stuck in their ways, and maybe this is just kind of, you know, the old boys club and how things are done. And certainly that's not right. But, you know, the hope is maybe the younger generation doesn't have that mindset. Or maybe that's just kind of too in the weeds right now.
I'm not aware of data that has been completed since 2014. I think it really just kind of hearing people's kind of civility stories. And in the recommendations, actually the report calls out the younger population as being on the receiving end of incivility more frequently.
Interesting.
So I'm not aware of any data, but I do think that the younger attorneys, they're really trying to reach them because we don't want them to leave the profession because of incivil conduct or just because, you know, it's a kind of the adversarial process can be quite difficult. And younger lawyers are really trying to learn how to be a lawyer. And sometimes they don't have the best examples. And so I think it's kind of a combination of all of us working towards trying to reaffirm that this is very important in our profession. I mean, and also since I've also heard that since we've been on Zoom, incivility has gone up as well. So I think this is just a really big attempt to kind of raise the profile of these issues and reaffirm that our profession is really, you know, dedicated to civility.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah,
Ryan?
I just wanted to plant a seed for thought for future reference. So there was one situation, and this has happened actually a couple of times, but we were negotiating settlement, and the opposing counsel was clearly intoxicated during these negotiations. He was sexually harassing my co-counsel. He was using profanity. All of these communications were memorialized in emails, and he was able to use the evidence code prohibiting publication or filing in a court filing confidential settlement communications, right? And so that was his cover of how he can get away with everything he was doing. And so maybe we want to address that in the future, if not COAF, somebody else, that if an attorney is engaging in this type of misconduct, that attorney cannot be protected, that this conduct cannot be kept secret because of the prohibition on publishing confidential settlement communications. And so that's all I have to say.
And I would encourage you to submit a public comment if you think, that's something that the Board of Trustees should be aware of. And I mean, this is really, we really invite comments, especially from the Council on Access and Fairness, because the recommendation does also call out that the incivility at the bias link. So I think that the Council on Access and Fairness is uniquely situated to kind of think about how these issues affect and how sometimes the standards can be used more harshly against attorneys of color or women attorneys or younger attorneys. And so I would really encourage this group to submit public comment and think about if this does go through, we will be doing some education around it. And I would love to work with COAF on that as well.
And just to clarify, COAF members as individuals submitting comment, not COAF itself submitting comment.
Can COAF submit a comment as a group?
I don't think so, because we are part of the state bar.
Okay.
And it's a state bar comment period. So it's COAF members as individuals.
Yes.
Kathy, really quick, what's the
Are
comment
we,
period?
Okay.
Sorry, Kathy. No, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, as individuals and in the other groups that you're part of,
Yes.
To spread, just to kind of spread the word about these changes so that people are aware of them. And if they want to submit public comment as licensees, that they would do that as well.
And when does that comment period end, Kathy?
So it's just been posted and it's a 60-day comment period. So let me just make sure I have the date correct. And I'll also drop or Elizabeth, is it okay if I drop that link in the chat or?
I can send it out afterwards. The chat's to say. Thank you.
Oh, okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. And I think Shalak and Heather both have questions.
January 30th is the deadline.
January 30th, is that what you said?
Yes, of 2023.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, great. And then Shalak. And then
Yes.
Heather.
And one of them went out of my head, so lucky everybody. I have a question, Kathy, the extent to which any of the, it came back. Okay, so one is the extent to which, to go a little bit off of what Ryan was saying, any of these apply to, and I don't know the extent to which the state bar applies, so this might be a little bit of my ignorance, to arbitration, mediation type settlements. So as particularly where the courts in various types of practice may have mediation requirements or arbitration requirements. I'm thinking family court, for example. Is there would this rule apply to those and governing behavior within those mediations or arbitration, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, there's a new rule out that now arbitrators have to be lawyers. So, yeah, it's new.
Okay.
So yeah, Kathy.
I mean, so yeah, I would say that it would be licensee specific. So, I mean, I think if there are those different prohibitions, especially like what Ryan spoke about, using that as a cover, I mean, I think those are all things that should be raised through the use of public comment, and then they can determine whether or not there's a certain group or something, or if there needs to be more explanation or anything to kind of support this rule.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. My second question, and again, this might be more a matter of my ignorance than anything else. Is there somewhere where the state bar has provided whether the state bar is a definition of incivility, particularly because in work around DEI, the phrase incivility can be used to dampen people who are experiencing bias in any form, or other, activism or calling out behaviors that expressly work against diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, justice, access, etc. So I'm wondering if the state bar has thought of or tapped into the myriad of resources that exist for a definition where this would not be weaponized against people who are simultaneously saying, I've experienced this bias, I've experienced this issue, there's a systemic issue, and are told, well, now you're being incivil, when in fact what they're doing is calling out an issue, tone notwithstanding. And I'm just curious whether that's come across, and again, if that's somewhere and I'm just ignorant, then please forgive that.
I think that that's a really great point. I do think that, and maybe, I don't know if Ryan can speak to this, the report does talk about that a little bit. The state bar has a civility toolbox currently that they created back when the oath was put in place. So if this rule is changed, then of course that would be updated. And in terms of the definition of civility, I think it's a little bit, it's more, I've heard it being called similar to obscenity, you know it when you see it. So that is a little bit, can be somewhat problematic to certain populations of people. So I don't know if there is an exact answer in terms of the definition of civility, but I would check the civility toolbox that the state bar currently has.
Yeah, I froze. Okay, so what I saw was what I kind of picked up on, and what we discussed is more of the definition of incivility, right? And it's pretty much like obscenity. You know it when you see it. And in the proposed regulation, it says, we look at the circumstances, the facts of the situation, things like that. And I guess a concern could grow out of that, like that type of clause or rule could chill certain advocacy if someone was afraid of being held accountable for being uncivil. But I mean, we probably have to kind of see how it pans out in real life. And because in this kind of situation, I mean, we all know how to act, right? And so maybe it wouldn't chill certain types of advocacy, aggressive and zealous advocacy that we do every day as lawyers.
Thanks, Ryan. Heather.
Do we in the inactive survey, are we asking specifically about if incivility is one of the reasons why people go inactive?
I don't know the answer to that.
But I think we should.
We could,
As a
Yeah,
distinct call out from belonging questions.
Sure.
Because I think that's.
and I don't want to put Lisa Chavez on the spot, but she may know. And I see her box on the screen.
Yeah, I'm not sure of that, but I would agree that would be a great thing.
Which may also help us capture data, because again, Leah said, like, we're seeing inactivity or why am I blinking? Happening at the 8 to 10 year mark, but all those people would have taken the oath. So if they're on the receiving end of people who did not take the oath, creating incivility in their environment, that would be interesting data to capture too. So both, have you experienced it, and without identifying anyone, like, kind of what age group you're getting it from would be interesting. So
one other question, if I may, through the chair.
Yes.
Judge, it's okay. Thanks. Sorry, Kathy. When you mentioned the MCLEs that you had proposed, I'm wondering, is there some thought to adding an MCLE specifically, not just the elimination of bias is great, but that's a vehicle to discrimination that we're trying to get rid of. But I'm wondering if there's a school of thought that believes that we should start adding MCLEs around actual diversity, inclusion and diversity, and what that means, what it looks like. That's number one. And number two, also any school of thought around adding an MCLE around the development of emotional intelligence skills for all lawyers.
Okay, that might rule people out.
I mean, what? Freak people
You
out?
can add that to character and fitness if that's what Shalak said. It's a good idea.
Yeah, no.
All right, anybody else have anything for Kathy, who has been so incredibly patient with us today?
No, but just to Mr. Torres's point, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the diversity inclusion stuff, but I can definitely keep these in our thoughts as we go through the MCLE. We're looking at the MCLEs a little bit differently and trying to look at what works for our licensees. So I will definitely keep those comments, and I would encourage you as a licensee to submit public comment to that effect, because the public comment on the MCLE requirements is broader, and it does kind of ask, are there other areas where we should be developing MCLE topics?
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you so much. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Kathy, Shalak has one more thought.
It's just something that might be useful as you look at some of the MCLEs. I feel like a broken record, but I think looking at how the ABA phrased the standard 303C around cultural competency, anti-bias, anti-racism, I know in other areas of COAF work, we've looked at what it might look like for the state bar to adopt some of that, and I know that's a separate discussion, but I think on the MCLE side, if you're thinking about language that might be a little bit more amenable across the attorney population, in that people might be familiar with it, and that language might be useful to think about, okay, what does it look like to have an MCLE around cultural competency, which is different than an MCLE around, something else, and can certainly tie to practical legal skills that hopefully people will see they need to develop.
I'll definitely.
Bravo. Yeah.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Shalak.
thank you so much for allowing me to present. And if this passes, I would look forward to working with COAF or with Elizabeth's office to develop some type of civility and the link to bias, because the report does call that out specifically as courses that should be developed. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope everybody has a great day.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you. And thank you, Randy.
Yeah, thanks, Randy.
Thank you all.
Okay, folks, so we are at noon, but I see that the amazing Lisa Chavez is here, and I know that she has to go later today, so we're gonna do item 7.2 before lunch, and that is the update on efforts to reform the attorney discipline system. I know that's also a big issue, and the incredible Sarah Good is our representative on that subcommittee. So I know that Sarah probably has stuff she wants to add in too. And I don't think lunch is here anyway. Okay. So Lisa, thanks for being
Hi,
here.
good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lisa Chavez. I'm the director of the Office of Research and Institutional Accountability. And I'm also the lead staff member to the Ad Hoc Commission on the Discipline System. And I'm here to give you an update to their meeting that they had on Monday of this week. And looking forward to hearing Sarah to chime in and fill in gaps as needed. So let's get started. You can see my screen. Let me go to the beginning of the presentation would be good. Look, I'm already giving you a preview of the,
Yes.
okay, here we go. So, so just really big picture, the last time I came to you, I shared with you the recommendations that this group adopted back in summer. And I shared with you then that in September, we were going to present the full report to the Board of Trustees. That did happen in September. And at that time, the Board of Trustees formally received the report and then put the recommendations out for public comment. And what that means is that we made the all the recommendations available to the public to weigh in on. And I'm going to explain what that means in a minute for those of you who aren't familiar with the process that we have here at the State Bar. So for 60 days, the recommendations were out for public comment. And then on December 5th, Monday of this week, the commission met to review all those public comments. We received comments from around 78 people slash entities. And the purpose of that meeting was to review those comments and to consider any new recommendations, but also to consider modifying recommendations as needed, and in particular, clarifying language where needed. And so what I'm going to do today is share with you those deliberations that they had on Monday and what came out of it. Well, just moving forward, in January, we're going to issue an updated report to the Board of Trustees. It's going to include all those public comments, and it's also going to include a set of staff recommendations for the issues raised that came out of the public comments, and I'll explain more about that. Okay, so here, let's talk about those public comments. So like I said, we had a 60-day public comment period, and that ended on November 28th of this year. We received 78 responses, and 54 of those were from attorneys. And this is very typical for our public comment processes. You know, even though we try to do extensive outreach to non-attorneys, to the public in California, you know, so many people who are participating in our social medias, who are receiving updates here and there through social media are attorneys. So this is very typical for the majority of our public comments to be from attorneys. And so in the public comment process, we asked everyone to essentially vote or give their opinion on recommendations. And then they're also given an opportunity to write a narrative on a particular recommendation. So for each of the recommendations the ad hoc commission has adopted, they were asked to select one of three options. They agree with the recommendation, but only if modified. They straightforward agree with the proposed recommendation, or they disagree with the proposed recommendation. So staff compiled all of the information that we received, again, the votes, as well as the public comments themselves, the narratives, and those narratives ranged from 1 to 2 sentences to like 3 pages of narrative and comments, okay? And that people were able to really hone in on, I am commenting on this recommendation. And so we prepared a staff memo for the members of the commission that summarize the results of those votes. And then we also identified some comments that we felt that we should just put in front of this commission because they had raised interesting ideas that were very related to recommendations they had already adopted. Then we also provided a report that summarized all the comments. I said these narratives that varied in length for each recommendation. And that report also contains names, if people gave them, the organizations, and also links to attachments that people do. That's another thing that we allow people to do, is provide attachments in support of anything that they're saying. Okay, and I just wanted one last thing on the public comments for those of you who aren't familiar with this process. We do allow people to submit comments anonymously, but we also allow people to give their names and identify the organizations that they are speaking on behalf of. Okay, so here's a summary of the results of those recommendations. So there are a total of 9 recommendations. And again, remember the 3 categories, right? The middle category is agree with proposed recommendation. So let's focus on that first. What you should glean from this chart is that for every single recommendation, it received that vote, which is, so that shows that of the 78 people that responded to our survey, or the public comment rather, the majority of them agree with these proposed recommendations. However, the two recommendations that received more of the agree only if modified are the recommendations that have to do with removing of creating timelines that address removal of discipline history from the State Bar profile website for attorney profiles and expungement of discipline records. As you can see, for those two, a quarter or more of all respondents said that they agree with this, but they only if modified. And that's where we received a lot of public comment. And then the other recommendation that actually kind of stands out as a percent that had a high share that disagreed with it, which is the recommendation with regards to sanctions. As you may recall, that recommendation was that the State Bar should pursue statutory change that would eliminate all disciplinary sanctions. 21% said that they disagreed with that. Okay, and down here at the bottom, this shows that the recommendation with regard to the state providing attorney representation for attorneys who are low income, as defined by the State Bar, should have receive representation as they go through disciplinary proceedings that receive the highest level of approval. In other words, the agreement with the proposed recommendation. So we're really encouraging that. So sorry for the dog barking. Okay, wait, excuse me. Look at the door on the dog. Okay, so now that's some potential new recommendations that staff put in front of the commission to consider. So, like I said, we have this significant share of people that said that we agree with the recommendation with regards to the timelines. We just have some ideas for modification. So as a reminder, the ad hoc commission recommended these timelines for removal of discipline history from the website and expungement of attorney records. And they focus on discipline. So for people who receive the discipline of private reapproval, the recommendation is that with 1 year or when conditions are met, that discipline that's currently listed on the website will be removed and the record would be expunged. Okay, so the recommendations have to do with disciplines and these are the timeframes. And so public was asked to weigh in on these. And they proposed, we received comments that made the following suggestions. Basically, the comments came down to this. These timeframes look great, and we love the idea, but we have some ideas for more categories that should have their own timelines. The first has to do with administrative suspensions. Now, right now, attorneys have the opportunity to request that on a one-time basis, that an administrative suspension that's sitting on their records, for example, for failure to pay fees or failure to complete an MCOB requirement, be expunged. Okay, so we received a comment that said, we need timelines for this too. In addition to the discipline, we need timelines for automatic removal of administrative suspensions. So going forward, staff is going to develop actually a comprehensive proposal to address administrative suspensions. Second, another two kind of other related items is a comment with regards to, there's a set of attorneys out there who may be interested in just simply resigning from the state bar, but that charge is pending. And perhaps we can make it so that when they resign and they say, I'm no longer practicing law, I'm moving on with my life, maybe we could remove their history from the website and expunge their records so that they can pursue new careers. So that would be, say, like an automatic thing rather than waiting for, say, several years for things to pass according to those other timelines. And then another category has to do with attorneys who have resigned with charges pending, but eventually they were reinstated to the bar. And if you look at their profiles, it shows that they resigned with charges pending. And so the suggestion was, can we create a timeline for people like me that this happened to me? I was reinstated at the bar, but right now my discipline history shows this. So again, so with regards to these two at the bottom, so the commission, had some really interesting conversations about all three of these. And the decision moving forward was that they didn't vote on these recommendations because ultimately we don't have enough information. Under normal circumstances, staff would have done a lot more research to, how many people does this apply to? How many people are we talking? So they're just provide more information. We didn't have that opportunity because of the short time frame. So we agreed that starting at the top, admin suspension staff will develop a comprehensive proposal because that's very straightforward. But with regard to these two at the bottom, staff is going to explore these some more. And if appropriate, we'll develop recommendations for the Board of Trustees to consider. So the commission did not agree with these recommendations, but rather had a discussion, and staff is just going to take, their ideas, their thoughts, their considerations, concerns, et cetera, and then move forward with it on a kind of a separate track. Okay, so two other comments yielded potential recommendations. One comment noted that, well, why don't we just, given that people are concerned that attorneys can Google, Google attorneys' names and then their discipline history comes up, why not modify the State Bar website so that website search engines do not produce attorney profiles? And so, again, the commission debated this back and forth, pros and cons, and ultimately the decision was that staff needs to explore this further. And then the last, excuse me. I'm sorry. Okay. And then the last comment that came up was an interesting comment that why not require attorneys to provide notice of regulation by the state bar? Similar to California code that requires medical doctors provide such notice. I mean, those of you who may recall, if you go to a doctor's office, there's usually a place, someplace that says that, you know, this licensee is regulated by the state of California, Medical Board of California, and they provide a website address and a phone number. And it doesn't exactly say, if you want to file a complaint, call this number. It's just notification of the consumer that the medical licensee is regulated by the Medical Board of California and gives a website address and a phone number. So the public comment was, why not have the state bar do the same? And so again, the commission debated these back and forth. It was very interesting discussion, and ultimately this proposal received very little support. So at this time, the staff is not going to pursue this. Okay, that is all I have. So like I said, that our next action item is to update the report with all the public comments that we received, probably like as an attachment, and then a reference to the conversation that we had on December 5th. And then at that point, the Board of Trustees will receive the report in January. And at that point, they will make decisions about which of these recommendations they're interested in acting upon. Thank you. Sarah. What do you think?
Yeah, Sarah, anything to add?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, questions? Shalot's got her hand. Yes.
Yes, sorry, it's as to the last thing you said, Lisa, and all of this was very interesting. Defer to you and Sarah on details and all of that. I do have a question, and this may be getting more into that internal debate than you would like. But I'm curious as to whether or not there was little support for providing notice of regulation because there's already such an easy mechanism for people to find it. If someone Googles, you know, this Heather Anderson, and it's going to pop up the State Bar website, and it's very easy for the public to find, where can I find that you're actually licensed, and to provide that. But if the staff is going to review whether or not to modify that and perhaps make it more difficult for the public to verify someone's licensure, would you revisit whether or not that notice of regulation is necessary? And I want to call out that this is coming particularly from my immigration law background, and the fact that certain communities are very much taken advantage of by people who purport to be licensed attorneys and in fact are not. And a piece of protection is the ability for them to be able to figure out relatively quickly, not even discipline, but just, is this person licensed somewhere, right? And so I'm curious whether there would be a revisiting of the notice of regulation if a recommendation is made to modify the website such that, you know, putting in this person's name, it doesn't immediately, or it doesn't lead as easily to record of their licensing. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's a great question.
Yeah, so I can say to you right now that the commission's, you know, ultimately going to be dissolved in January upon receipt of the final report. However, all of those details will be included in the report, that the staff recommendation that we are pulling together. So I can definitely see how something like this isn't going to be dropped, because it'll be part of the official record that this was like something that they discussed, et cetera. But let me just share with you, I have notes from the discussion. So let me just share with you a little bit more about, you know, people's concerns about this recommendation. And with regards to the a UPL, the unlicensed to practice law, the State Bar has a whole like agenda on how we try to reach people who are victims of such attorneys who are unauthorized to practice law. So just so you know that there's that. But let me just share with you like some of the concerns. Okay, how's that sound?
Yes, yes. And
Okay,
I'm not
sure.
saying that I think we should have it, that should exist. I'm just curious about the two in tandem.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Let me just share really quickly, you know, and the really interesting comments. Well, first of all, someone had said like, well, right now the State Bar receives like 16,000 complaints a year. Do we think that there's actually tons of more people out there who can't complain? And so that was like one question, just like, what problem are we trying to solve here? So that was issue number, interest, you know, factor raised number one. Folks pointed out that given the different modes of service that lawyers provide, like maybe this idea of requiring like them to post a physical notice wouldn't be effective for attorneys, given that so much work is done on their phone, so much work is done in jails and courthouses, whatever. So they were proposing alternate ideas. Maybe it has to be posted at courthouses. Maybe it has to be posted on attorneys' websites. In other words, we just can't copy what the medical board requires of doctors, given the just different profession, the different modes of service. Other people questioned how the state bar would monitor, even if say we were to go down this road and say, here are all the options for you to make this notification available. How would the state bar monitor that compliance? And then someone pointed out that given all, they'd rather the state bar focus on preventative measures rather than, because if you pass a regulation, you need to ensure compliance. So then that you would need resources to ensure that compliance. And so someone problematized that as well. So Sarah, do you want to add anything else to that discussion? Because it was an interesting one.
Yeah, not really. I mean, again, as Lisa pointed out, the proposal was to post something in someone's office. And I think while everybody is all for accessibility, right? We just didn't, there was a lot of sentiment that posting a notice in the office wouldn't provide greater accessibility, which I think Lisa just said. So, this is all, the staff is going to consider it and come back with it. So there's nothing there. And vis-a-vis what about to the other point, Lisa, about internet searches and stuff? Did you want to address that part of it?
Yeah. So where we need to do there is first and foremost work with because we've heard different things. So for some, I do a search on an attorney I know, and then it comes up like their profile. Other times it doesn't, right? A lot of people have said when people Google my name, my profile comes up. But then we'll do some searches and then people don't come up. So we're going to work, our first step as staff is to work with our IT group and understand to what extent our website is set up to be indexed by search engines or not. Because the recommendation is that other licensee agencies are set up that they purposely make it so their profile, their licensee lookup function within their websites is not indexed by search engines. So we need to just get to the bottom of this and see what's going on with our website, and then just learn more about other websites of other licensee agencies in California. So that's the first step, is just to understand where we are right now.
Thank you both for that additional information. I guess I know the bar does a lot around UPL, and I think a main way for that to someone not even to become a victim is the easy ability to figure out. And I'm not saying that posting is the right way at all for all the reasons you all mentioned. When it was raised in tandem, I thought, oh my goodness, if we take away that opportunity, are we setting more people up to be victims that now the bar has to address rather than the prevention of it?
Thank you for that. I will definitely make a note of that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shalak. That's a really good point. Anybody else have questions for Lisa or Sarah? Seeing none, now is an excellent time for us to stretch and have lunch. And our lunch will go to 1 p.m. So feel free to turn off your cameras, stretch, get some food, and we will see each other at 1 o'clock.
Thank you.
See you all in a bit. 1. Hopefully everyone is back. Not everyone's camera's on, so I'll just assume you're all back. And I want to personally thank Elizabeth for the fantastic taco bar that we had here in Los Angeles, for those of you who were unable to make it down.
And thank you to Shannon.
I knew I should have gone today. I knew I should have.
Shalak just went to get more guacamole. I'm just telling you, it was super good. So thank you all for coming back. And we're going to get right into it. And I know that this is something that folks are really interested in. So we have Melanie Lawrence here, who is the Director of Office of Professional Support and Client Protection. And you are going to present on the probation project.
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. I'm the post-lunch presentation, so I hope I don't put anybody to sleep.
Oh, no.
And I do have a presentation for you. I'm happy to answer questions as we go along. And just, interrupt me. So I am from the Office of Professional Support and Client Protection. To give you an idea, I've been with the bar for 17 years. And most of my time actually has been in the discipline system. So I'm very familiar with working with the Office of Probation and ways that it can improve. And we're hoping to do that by actually redesigning it. So you can go ahead and advance the slides. So the reason we're doing this is the bar took a look at recidivism rates in the discipline system in 2019. And we're concerned because what we can see is that there are not that many attorneys who come into the discipline system, but those that do come in with some frequency. And so we wanted to see if there was a way that we could impact the rates of recidivism. And also the slide can tell you that the recidivism rates also vary by race, in that there certainly are disparities, overrepresentation in some of the categories in terms of the rates of recidivism. Now, the other thing I want to highlight for you is when I talk about recidivism, the way that the bar is defining it for this purpose is when someone has been in the discipline system and been disciplined, and then if they get a new complaint, so just a complaint that walks in the door, not necessarily that they've been disciplined, but that is one data point for recidivism in this context. Also, if the complaint then moves forward in the discipline process, so many of the complaints that walk in the door, probably anywhere from 40 to 50% are actually closed at the intake stage. But then if they move on to be investigated, that's also a data point for recidivism. And then if they move past that point and actually charges are filed, then that is how recidivism is being defined in this context. So if you can go ahead and advance slides. So the way that the bar has done probation historically is that really it's viewed as a self-rehabilitative model. And I would call it sort of a one size fits all. And by that, I mean that I think that there has been a view over the years that these are attorneys that are in the discipline system, and they should be able to manage, and they should be able to manage themselves, and they should be able to manage the conditions of probation. And so it's been a bit of a hands-off approach when it comes to the probation department, in that the probation department will oftentimes, review conditions of probation with a respondent attorney and sort of then send them on their way to comply or not comply. But there's not a lot of interaction that goes on with the attorneys thereafter in our historical model. And also when I mean one size fits all in terms of disciplinary conditions, oftentimes attorneys get sort of the same menu of conditions ordered, and there's no individualization of the conditions. And the reason for that really is that there's really no inquiry that's done to determine whether there are some specific conditions that might be more helpful to a respondent. And a lot of times that's because, if you can imagine, if a case goes through trial and there's then a decision at the end, the way that it works typically is, the judge has what the judge has in the record. So they know what the misconduct is, and they also may know what some of the mitigating circumstances are, which could be mental health issues or substance abuse issues, but they may not. If the respondent hasn't introduced any of that information into the record, which there might be reasons to not, then the court is not going to know that. And so the court may not order conditions to address those kinds of issues. And also, the reality is that the judge is not necessarily an expert at mental health and substance abuse issues, et cetera. So they may not have a particular view into what might be particularly helpful for an individual respondent.
So that's the way that it has worked traditionally. And we're moving then towards a targeted supervision strategies and support model, which I'll tell you what that is in a moment, if you can move ahead. And so the redesign project is really a framework for changing the system that we've been doing, hoping to improve performance in the probation and rehabilitation context, reduce recidivism, which is good for everyone, and hopefully then increase public protection, and really work more in partnership with the court to enforce probation orders that the court imposes. So go ahead. So there's a variety of ways that we're looking at doing this. So we want to provide an appropriate level of supervision. So, what that means, and I'll talk a little bit more about sort of how we get there, is not treating everybody the same. So some people might need more from us than others. We want to make sure that we're providing the tools necessary to actually comply with conditions of probation. And so that means sort of expanding the resources that we have to offer. Again, reducing recidivism and racial disparities. And I'll talk about some ways that we've been thinking about that, and enhancing public protection. So go ahead and move forward. So there are a lot of components that go along with doing this. And not one of them, we can't look at this in a vacuum. And it's also a multi-stage, really multi-year process. So the first thing is identifying predictive indicators of recidivism. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we've done this. But the idea is, let's find out what the factors are that most significantly impact recidivism, what we know about our population now, so that we can figure out how to best address those. And then develop a supervision strategies assessment tool. So that might commonly be known as a risk assessment tool, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. Identify and address needs and stabilization factors. So I will say this is a learning process for me too. So I've been learning how these all fit together. But the assessment tool that we're going to be talking about is really a tool that looks at sort of static factors of people in the system. And the assessment, the needs assessment and stabilization factors look at those things which are dynamic. That's okay. Which are dynamic. So, for example, they might be substance abuse, it might be family issues, might be financial issues, things that can change and we might be able to impact. And also stabilization factors. So what are things in a particular person's life that actually make them less likely to recidivate? So for example, maybe they have a stable job, maybe they have a mentor in their life, something like that. And so those might actually negate some of the higher risk recidivism factors. So we want to look at the person as a whole. Also then develop supervision strategies and case planning. So basically, once we have the picture of who this person is, what are the best ways that we can actually work with them to hopefully support them through their probation and hopefully in their practice in the future so that we don't see them back in the discipline system. Part of that is going to be, and we're in the infancy of this, but revising the terms and conditions of probation so that we have more of a menu of other items that the court can use instead of just the one size fits all approach. And then the biggest thing really for us on a going forward basis is going to be to collect the data and examine it as we move along. Are we doing it? Do we have the right factors, for example? Are the strategies that we're employing working? Do we need to do something different? So those are all the pieces. There are a lot of pieces, and it's a big project. I mentioned earlier that this began in 2019, and we're just now done with the first part of the risk assessment tool. So it really is a years-long project. So go ahead and move to the next stage. So let's talk about the tool that we are going to be using. So I know that a lot of times when people hear risk assessment, there is a concern about that because if you liken it to the criminal justice system, we know that a lot of times Those, at least historically, have been used for things like bail setting, for example. Also for determining sentencing. So I want to be clear that the purpose of the tool that we are using are not for any of those things. It's not for the court to determine what level of probation somebody should be getting. It really is designed to look at then, what are the factors that might be implicated for a particular respondent? What kind of support and resources might they need from us? Do they need more? Do they need less? Whether that's conditions, whether it's actually just a support and interaction. Do they need some interim goals set for them rather than just, sending someone on their way and saying, I'll see you in a year and I hope everything goes okay for you. So that's the purpose of the tool. That's the reason why we're using it. So it informs decisions about programming and interventions, brings consistency, accuracy, and transparency to decisions, and reduces recidivism. And I'm going to talk about the tool and sort of how we've tried to be mindful of some of the concerns that typically come up when it comes to risk assessment tools. So how did we get to the risk assessment tool? So we, our data gurus, pulled data from a 10-year span of 2,548 attorneys who have been reproved or on probation in the discipline system. Now, I will tell you that one of the challenges in a project like this and why it's so important to now collect data and be mindful of what we're collecting and how we're collecting and what we're doing with it on a moving forward basis is that, the bar hasn't always been stellar at data collection. And, some of that just is not knowing. You don't know what you don't know, right? So, we are limited in our data set by what is there. And so as a result, some of the factors that we're going to see are factors that are kept in the data. On a going forward basis, there might be other factors that we can now identify and collect information on that might be more meaningful, but we just don't know right now. I think that it will also be better because, as those of you who are attorneys know, there's a questionnaire that when we're re-upping our licenses every year, we're asked to fill out. A lot of it is demographic information as well as practice area information. So that information then can be used for this purposes as well. But that's only been in the last couple of years. So in order to create a tool like this, we wanted to look back 10 years, so we are limited by our data set. But some of that information does exist. There's some data, demographic information that was used. Also, the group looked at the charges that had been filed that led to the reproval or the probation conditions, some admissions information that was available, what kind of new complaints, investigations, and filings then came after related to a particular respondent attorney, and what conditions were imposed upon that person during the period of supervision. So that's the information that we had to look at. So you can go ahead and move forward. Now, one of the challenges here is, I imagine that the group is familiar with the study of Dr. Farkas, and then which came after, which was Dr. Robertson, who sort of extrapolated some of the information from that. So one of the challenges is when our experts, and I should say that in order to actually formulate this tool that we're using, we contracted with experts, statisticians who are also experts in the area of criminal justice in particular, to help us design the tool. But when we looked at the factors, what we knew is that, for example, Dr. Farkas and Robertson highlighted that there are racial disparities in the discipline system, but some of those can be explained by, for example, Black male attorneys would have more what are called bank reportable actions. Okay, and when they looked at the data that they had, they could see that that would have been a risk factor. Also representation by counsel. So we knew from Farkas and Robertson that that was an issue that exacerbated disparities in the discipline system. So what we asked the experts to do, and we talked about, and they were very mindful of the fact that we were concerned about this, is what would happen to our tool if we pulled out those factors and we didn't use them? Would it still be a valid tool, for example? So they pulled out the factors. They reran the tool, and I'm no data expert, I'm no statistician, so it was a little bit of a mystery to me, but they did pull out the concerning factors and determined that even after doing that, the tool still worked equally well across racial, ethnic, and gender categories, so that it didn't negatively impact the validity of the tool. So that's a good thing, and we're happy about that. So if you can go ahead and move. Okay, so the tool. So this is the tool that was delivered essentially, and by that I mean these are the factors that the experts determined were the most indicative of recidivism, and that impacted recidivism at this various levels. So for what I had said earlier, whether or not they had a new complaint, new investigation, or new filing. And so just by way of example, like in the middle, you see 9.20 rule condition. So that's if somebody in a prior discipline had that as a condition of probation, a restitution condition, if somebody had to comply with a restitution condition. Now, what we don't know about these factors is why, right? We don't know why they're impactful. We just know that they are impactful. So they isolated each of these factors and then they gave them a score. So all of the factors have a score of 1, except for those where you see that in brackets, there might be a 2 or a 3. So for example, prior performance related complaints, if someone had 6 or more prior performance related complaints, they would get a 3 on the risk assessment. So that's how this works. Now, how it mechanically works is that we actually have to, for each then respondent attorney, we have to have the ability to extract this data, which that's part of what we're working on now. So we're not quite there yet, but we have to be able to extract this data and then it will give a score. Now, the way that the experts did this is that they scored these in a way that everyone will fit into one of 3 categories. So it's basically a third, a third, a third. So you'll have a low risk, a moderate risk, and a high risk. The nice thing about that too is that it will help us in terms of resource allocation, right? So there may be actually attorneys who are so low risk that they don't even get sort of the same level of monitoring that they would get now. They really might just need 1 or 2 things. There's somebody that you can kind of send on your way and be done with it. They can be successful and we won't see them again. There are other people who might be at the moderate level. And this is one of the things that we're working on, sort of, well, what does that mean? You know, if you're at the moderate level, what does it mean if you're at the high level in terms of what supervision looks like for you? And I should say also, in this project, we haven't actually made it up all on our own. We've contracted with a consultant, an expert who is a chief probation officer in Northern California, who's really worked in the area of this sort of proactive regulation and supervision. And he's really guided our process here. So, you know, some of the things that we're talking about, like I said, is so what does that mean if I'm low or moderate or high? And, you know, and I sort of said this earlier, but I want to be clear that it doesn't necessarily mean that if you're high risk, now you have 20 things to do where the low risk person has 2. It could mean that, but it could also mean that, you know, you only have 5 things to do, but I'm going to work closer with you to help you be more successful at meeting those 5 things. So, you know, if you have a restitution condition, for example, it might not mean you pay $5,000 in a year. It might mean, okay, let's talk about how you're going to get to $5,000. Let's check in 30 days. You know, what's going on in your life? What are some of the things that you can do? Can you make a $5 payment, you know, for example? So having some more regular contact with people along the way could be another way that it looks different.
Can I ask you a quick question, Ellen? So when we're looking at the things on the top, right, the 920 rule condition, the restitution condition, that's all stuff that's handed down by the state bar court judge, right, in a decision or made by, well, I guess it's always probably handed down by the judge, right?
Yeah.
And not necessarily by the Office of General Counsel or something like that.
Oh, right. So yes, I mean, all of the conditions that you see on there are things that would have been imposed, I mean, mostly by the Supreme Court. It's made by recommendations from the state bar court, but ultimately it's the Supreme Court.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And so those kinds of things that are factoring into the assessment tool, like what the judge said about, okay.
Yes, about what the person's gonna do. Yeah. Okay, so what does this mean? This is sort of what I touched on. So the current model, on the left, you'll see most people have to comply with these conditions. There may be some others, but most people have to comply with these conditions. In the new model, they may still have to comply with those conditions, but there may be some others. Or there may be fewer than what they're having to do now. So what we'll be looking at is we're assigning a support level based on the assessment. Now it's based, and this is part of the challenge in sort of rolling something out like this as a process, but it's based on administering the tool, which is based on the factors that we saw. In a perfect world, okay, if we had the data set that we would want, we would be able to also do a needs assessment. So the needs assessment would also then factor in, you know, what are their substance abuse issues? Are there mental health issues? The financial problems, family problems? Because we don't have that information, and when I say that, I mean, we would normally have that information about somebody, but what we don't know is because there's no way that has been collected over the years. There's been no reason to collect it, right? So we can't today say, for example, if you have a substance abuse issue, that makes you a high risk. We don't know that. Now we can guess that maybe that impacts it. But what we're going to need to do on a going forward basis is to collect this information. And the way that we do that then is our probation case specialists, who are, you know, akin to a probation officer, not exactly like a probation officer, but akin to one, will be administering the assessment tool, and they'll also be doing an intake interview. They don't do intake interviews. They haven't historically. I will tell you that I assumed supervision of this particular program at, let's see, June 1st of this year. And really, I mean, what I observed is that a lot of times the sole interaction that the probation case specialists have had with the respondent is an initial conversation about, I'm going to go through all of the conditions of probation. Do you have any questions? Okay. And I mean, that's just the way that it's been done. So they've been trained now, they've been being trained on motivational interviewing. That's a process, right? You don't just get that overnight. So it's a process they've been going through. It'll be an ongoing process. They're going to have to practice it, for example. But it will be actually interacting with people as people, trying to get some of this important information and information that we think is likely important. And I say that because, you know, they do have enough experience to know that these are the things that often come up. So we're going to be collecting that information. It's going to live somewhere that then our data people can, you know, over time, it's going to take months and years really to develop this. What of those things then are the most impactful for recidivism? But right now, when we collect that information, it's going to be meaningful, because what we'll want to know is, are there some conditions that the court didn't touch on that maybe the court should have? And maybe we want to add some conditions. Maybe we want to offer some additional resources that wouldn't have been obvious otherwise. Looking at the nature of the offense, what is the person here for to begin with? And future protective factors. So protective factors are what I touched on earlier. Things that are stabilizing factors, things that suggest that, you know, even though they may have factors indicative of recidivism, they also have stabilizing factors. So some things in their life that they can hold on to that may actually be helpful in terms of their ability to comply with probation. You go ahead and move it. Question? Yeah.
So if in the interview process, a person reveals other factors that maybe the court was unaware of, and then the probation officer still determines like, okay, in these 3 buckets, you fall into one of maybe the lower monitored ones. But the person themselves identifies like, I actually would prefer if you put me because of something that they've now revealed. Would we take that into consideration? Like that self-help
Yeah.
request, I think.
Sure. So, I mean, one thing is somebody could certainly say, you know, I think I need more than what you're offering, essentially. We can do that. You know, the other thing is the probation case specialist will also have the ability to sort of override, if you will, the tool. So the tool spits out your low, and something is revealed. And it may be, no, I actually think that this person would probably be better at a moderate or high. So they can do that as well. So
I was just thinking, as you said, you know, the current model is kind of dictated to you and you don't maybe feel like you have any input into it. But if you feel like the bar cares, you might say, I appreciate having a partner that in this process and would like some more support. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's probably especially true in these reportable bank actions, right? Where, you know, it would be nice if we had a little, you know, if I had a little, you know, primer in this, that would be helpful.
Yes.
And I think that would, you know, keep me from doing this in the future or whatever.
Or I know my own personality and an accountability partner with more frequency to me might be helpful, right?
Right. Yeah, and you know, really that is a relationship that we want to try and build and foster, which has not existed before. And you know, so you can imagine why then it's also important to have low, moderate, and high risk, right? Because you can't do that with everybody. Yeah, it's just not humanly possible. So so here's an example of how this might work with a respondent. So someone who needs high support, there might be regular check-ins with the person for a period of time. Let's see how it's going. It can always change. Maybe they need more after that. Maybe they need less. They satisfactorily complete within the first 6 months. So we're giving them some interim goals to complete things. Receives counseling and group support to lawyers assistance programs, we might send them there. And reassessing frequency and levels of support. So it's not only is it not one size fits all for everybody walking in the door, but it's also an evaluation throughout the process. Do people need more or less? Now you might have a low support person who, you know, they need to just check in quarterly, make sure things are on track. And there's one thing that they need to do and they can do it, you know, within by the end of the probationary term, and that's gonna do it. So that's an example of how it might work. Okay. So these are the next steps for us. Like I said, it really is a process that we've been working on for some time. Nothing happens as quickly as you would like it to. And this is definitely when you're trying to like turn a ship around like this, it takes a long time. So we need to work on developing the needs-based assessment. I talked a little bit about that, and that will begin as we start doing these in-depth interviews with people. Continuing the training for our probation case specialists, designing conditions. So, you know, we do have our standard conditions now, but it also is going to require the bar to put some resources into building other resources, frankly. Now, one way that we are doing that is through our lawyers assistance program. There's a monitoring side of it, but there's also a new support side to it. And they are going to be rolling out some e-learning courses, for example, and sort of developing other resources that we can point people to, depending on what people's concerns are. Collaborating with the state bar court to revise our conditions of probation. And again, we have to collect data and have a place for it to live and a way to use it on a going forward basis, because we want to make sure that the tool is working the way that we had anticipated. And it may be that we get down the road, you know, a year, probably more like 2 years, that we'll have enough information to say, is this impacting, you know, recidivism? And sometimes if you're looking at recidivism in 24 months, obviously it's going to take you some time. Have we identified the right factors? Do we now have information about other factors that we should be actually plugging into the tool? So it is a process, and we've made some progress in the last year in particular. I'm hopeful that in 2023, early in 2023, we'll actually have the ability to actually start using the tool. Our probation case specialists are getting close to being in a place where they can be more interactive. They're already being more interactive, certainly than they had been. And so I think we're really getting there, and I hope, and maybe I can come back to this group, I don't know, in the next year or two and tell you how we're doing, and hopefully it's a good thing. So, any questions? Or is anybody actually there?
I know.
All right.
Well, we're here. Does anybody have questions about this? Look, here's everybody. Now they can see them again.
No, but thanks for a fantastic presentation, Melanie, and so glad that you're at the helm of this important initiative. So thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah, I just said, was this something that was talked about in your ad hoc committee as well, revamping the?
Not to my recollection, it may have been, but if it was going to be handled by Melanie, I'm sure we didn't talk about it for very long.
Stephanie.
I don't think we did.
Stephanie has a question.
Sorry, this might be a really basic question, but is the probation department you're referencing, is that the same as like CDCR, Department of Probation?
So I don't know what CDCR is. So I'm thinking no.
Like in the criminal justice system, is that the same Department of Probation we're talking
Oh, no,
about?
no. Oh, no.
Okay.
Yeah, the state bar has its own probation department. We have our own court. We have our own probation department. It's very small.
Okay. Got it.
And they're not similar in that, you know, they're not armed and they're not out there arresting people and things like that. Nothing like that.
Not gonna be making
No
home
bad
visits.
For incivility, which
Home visits.
Yeah.
Incivility.
Yeah.
I do have one to that, given that it's small. I mean, this is maybe just me being curious, and tell me it's none of my business. Is there concern, maybe nicer than that, but I'm just wondering, as you encourage the probation case specialists to be more interactive, and of course, again, it's across the needs, but to invest more time, are there concerns about office staffing and actual like capability to move this through in a way where it's functional for both those who are receiving this higher level of guidance and those who are performing it? You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. Well, I mean, I think one thing related to the actual staffing, if you're talking about, do we have enough resources? I mean, I think it remains to be seen. My initial response would say, I think we're okay because again, it is also a way to allocate resources. And I mean, if it all works out, we'll see less people in the system, right?
Yes, that's true.
So we'll see. You know, and in terms of like the people doing the work, I think, you know, it is a new way of thinking and a new way of working. I think, you know, folks are on board and we're giving them tools and they're practicing and, you know, they've definitely pushed themselves outside of their comfort zones. I think it's just, you know, practice.
Yeah.
And ultimately, people want to know that they're being productive and impactful. And I'm hoping that they'll actually be able to see it now.
Awesome.
That's it.
I'm wondering what kind of feedback you got from the state bar court on this. You know, from a judicial standpoint, sometimes judges, you know, are less willing to rethink old ways.
Yeah. Well, you know, it is a challenge. We do really want to work in partnership. I think, you know, ultimately they also will be impacted in positive ways, hopefully. I know that they are interested in people succeeding on probation. And so, you know, I think that we'll be able to work together to get there, but it is a process. Yeah.
I'm imagining that, yes.
Anything else?
Any other thoughts for Melanie? Questions? No?
And I assume your case specialists go through the same implicit bias and other
Yes. okay, sure.
types of training, especially the higher touch that they are, the more necessary
Yes,
that is,
yes.
right?
Right.
It's like, I'm sure, but I feel like I have to
I
say
was thinking the
it.
same thing. I was like, that is one of the groups that's going to get that training.
Yes. Yeah.
This was excellent.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, good.
ton
Thanks
of
for
work.
thanks for having me.
Yeah,
All right.
thanks, Melanie. Really appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay. I think we are moving now to Jennifer to update us on the Diversity Summit.
Hi, everyone. Is someone presenting the slides today?
Do you want me to, or do you want to do that yourself?
Oh, if you can, that would be great, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Sure, okay, hold on. Sorry, pulling it up.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Zelnick, and I'm a senior program analyst in the Office of Access and Inclusion. Today, I'll give a brief presentation about the 2022 Diversity Summit, which took place on October 24th. First, I want to extend a big thank you to the working group, which consisted of Sarah Good, Michael Rhodes, and Kristen Rosie. And a special thanks to Sarah for facilitating the panel and to Kristen for closing remarks. The Diversity Summit began with opening remarks from Leah Wilson, then featured a presentation about the Diversity Report Card, followed by the panel discussion on advancement, mentorship, and sponsorship across sectors. Then there was a presentation about launching the Leadership SEAL program, and we closed with remarks by Judge Rosie. Out of a total, thank you, Elizabeth. Out of a total of 129 registrants, 113 people attended, and of the 113 attendees, 99 were audience members who did not participate as either presenters, facilitators, or captioners. Next slide, please. All 113 attendees received survey invitations following the Diversity Summit. However, we found that Zoom only registered surveys submitted by individuals registered as guests, and therefore failed to capture survey responses from the hosts, panelists, and captioners. Therefore, out of 99 potential respondents, we received 14 responses, which is just over 14% response rate. The survey consisted of 11 questions, which were a mixture of short answer, single choice, or multiple choice. I'll now share data from some of the responses. When asked to identify which topics participants wanted to discuss further, 12 out of 14 people mentioned retention and advancement, 7 identified mentorship, 6 mentioned the DEI Leadership SEAL program, and 4 wanted to further discuss the State Bar DEI data. Participants also identified a number of additional topics of interest. These included pipeline programs, mentorship versus sponsorship, and how to secure or institute sponsorship, data collection and metrics to measure belonging and inclusion, alternative pathways to licensure, and State Bar support money for accommodations, such as funding for ASL interpreters to hire or support deaf staff. Next slide, please. 12 out of 14, or over 85% of respondents, said they will encourage their firm, organization, or company to pursue the DEI Leadership SEAL program, which is a really positive response. Participants identified the following DEI challenges: data collection, lack of diversity in management, leadership, and positions of power and hiring, recruitment and retention broadly for staff of color and for niche areas of law, preventing and reducing bias in formal and informal performance evaluations, staff pushback against DEI initiatives, staff capacity to create DEI policies, low morale and overwork by associates, lack of professional development opportunities, and most distressing, employers who cause harm. Over 71% rated the presentation portions of the Diversity Summit as very good or excellent, and the rest rated presentations as good. Similarly, over 78% rated the panel as very good or excellent, and the rest rated it as good. Next slide, please. Finally, we developed 4 sets of recommendations based on the survey feedback, and you can see those there. For themes for the next Diversity Summit, this could be reflections on the first cohort of the DEI Leadership SEAL program or DEI recruitment, retention, and advancement. For the format of the next Diversity Summit, respondents requested a remote or hybrid format and to continue with mixed sector presentations. For ideas for the next diversity report card data analysis, respondents specified demographics by age and data about intersectionally marginalized individuals. And finally, for ideas to encourage participation in the annual attorney census, they specified awarding CLE credit for completion or incorporating it into the DEI Leadership SEAL program. So before I open things up to questions, I'd first like to invite COAF members who are in attendance to provide additional feedback if anyone has thoughts to share.
I mean, I thought it was great. I thought I actually learned a lot myself, and I you know, thought I've been doing this work for a long time. But I thought the panelists were phenomenal, and thank you, Sarah, because I know that you were instrumental in getting some of those panelists, and it was really it was well attended, and you know, I thought it was excellent. I don't know if anybody else watched it, but live, but it was good. Thoughts, Sarah? Sarah did a great job moderating.
No, I just wanted to thank Jennifer and Elizabeth for pulling it all together. So I thought it went really, really well. So thanks to the two of you.
Any questions?
Yeah, I was wondering if you could put that last slide up you had just now. Great presentation, by the way, Jennifer. Really good.
Thanks.
Yeah, you know, on the themes for next summit, I'm wondering if you could do like, I think it might be, and you might have already done this, so if you did, just let me know. Like do a spotlight where you can have somebody, you know, like maybe just Rosie, who's the leader of the team here, do an interview with somebody, like a spotlight on what somebody did, that they didn't have a program or they had a program, and here's because of COAF or because of the diversity summits, here's what we did that's different, and here are the results. So if you did a spotlight, I think that'd be really cool for everybody to see that this really does work, and having a real life examples would be, I think, beneficial.
Yeah, that'd be great. Shalak.
Yeah, just going on the ideas of themes and continuing some of the other conversation we've had today, I think it might be useful for this or another diversity summit to take some time to discuss inclusion and belonging and creating atmospheres of success. And that might go into the retention and advancement piece, but to the point that we were making earlier about how much we focus on bringing people in and not necessarily the conditions in which they are working, which might go to the employer harm that I think was one of the statements that was made earlier about experiences that individuals had. So just a thought on themes, and I think continuing mixed sector is also a very, very good idea. Although this might not be within the state bar's capacity, but doing mini summits every other year or so that are by sector could also be helpful to allow those, whether it's from an in-house or law firm or small firm or solo, to extrapolate some things, because this is anecdotal, but in the class I teach, they do a project. And anyways, one of the things that the students raised were, well, for those of us who will be solo or going into small firms and they don't have the HR departments, they don't have the DEI person that name insert large law firm here does, what do we do, right? Like, who do we report to? What do we do? And so I think something that's even that maybe more targeted might be useful, both here or for the diversity report card calls to actions to break down even a little bit more.
And maybe workshopping sessions
Yeah.
versus summit, like you hear all the
Right.
information
Yeah, maybe
and
it's
then
a-
in between with your actual small group, you work through some things.
Maybe that's what's by sector is,
Yeah.
okay, great, this thing's out there. How does it apply to me? If I'm a small firm, what does sponsorship look like when I've got 3 people?
Right. And we did use sector specific way back when.
Just 2 years ago.
I
Right.
remember.
Way back when, it felt long, it felt longer.
COVID.
It was COVID, it felt longer that we did sector specific, but yeah.
And also kudos to Jennifer and Elizabeth for, again, all the hard work you do on these and the other things.
I don't know how you guys find the time to do all this. But, okay. Anybody else have questions for Jennifer? Okay. Great. Well, thank you, Jennifer.
Thanks,
Again,
everyone.
it was a great presentation and a great summit. Okay, I saw Danielle earlier and there's Danielle still. Great.
Yeah.
Great. So Danielle, you are going to, this flows nicely from what Jennifer was just talking about. You're going to update us on the DEI Leadership SEAL program.
Yes, I am. And I think this will be pretty brief, but I do have a couple slides to walk us through. Great. So I am Danielle McCrae, and I'm a lead program analyst in our Office of Access and Inclusion here at the State Bar. Oh, there we go. And just as a reminder, an overview of the DEI Leadership SEAL program is the goal of this program is to encourage all legal employers to publicly commit to best practices in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the legal profession. We are making this available to all legal employers that employ California attorneys, regardless of sector. And then the program itself will have a list of 10 action items. And to participate in the program, an employer must commit to implementing at least 5 of those action items. And we've, in the last few months, developed this kind of new nuance to the program, if you will, that employers will have a year to implement the action items. That's always been the case to become a SEAL recipient, but there will be different tiers of SEAL recipients based on the number of action items they commit to implementing. So employers that implement 5, at least 5 will be bronze tier. Those that implement 7 will be silver tier. And then employers that implement at least 9 of the action items would be gold tier SEAL recipients. And we previewed all of this at the Diversity Summit that you all just received an update from Jennifer on. And just wanted to give you a couple updates on our progress since the last COAF meeting. As I mentioned, we announced the Leadership SEAL program at the Diversity Summit in October. And we've begun collecting information from employers that have already indicated interest based on references to the SEAL program in the diversity report card and also in the Diversity Summit itself in October. And we were originally planning to launch kind of right now, late November, early December, but ended up moving that launch to early 2023. And it's the goal there is to pair it with an update on the State Bar 5 years as a purely regulatory agency. So there's a goal to put out an update or a kind of status of the State Bar 5 years look back type item, and this would go out around the same time. So we're envisioning that to be in January 2023. We've also finalized the website language and some of the outward facing materials for this program. We're continuing to tweak just a little bit the application materials themselves, getting feedback from internal stakeholders and working with a designer to make it look really nice. And we're also developing a resource guide to provide best practices and tips to employers while they're implementing these action items. So that's actually something that Michael Trong, who's in the room with you all right now, is working on with us as well. And so next steps, we'll be finalizing that resource guide with input from our COAF working group. We have a couple meetings scheduled in the next week or so to get their feedback and advice on what would be most helpful to include in that resource guide. And then, as I mentioned, we plan to launch the program and application materials officially in early 2023. And then finally, we're beginning to identify early adopter employers. So please let us know if your employer would be interested in participating in the program and kind of being in that first cohort and helping us get the word out on the DEI Leadership Seal once we've launched it early next year. So that's the end of the prepared slides, but I'm happy to answer any questions or take any feedback. Yeah, I see it. Yep.
Can we go back to the slide that had the bronze, silver, gold levels?
Yes.
Why are we letting it be 9 instead of 10 on the gold? I think we should be striving for those people, for those companies that hit all 10. So I was just curious about that. I don't remember that conversation.
Or maybe do platinum.
Platinum is 10.
Let's do that.
Well, we will have opportunity to, iterate the program. So, as I know we've discussed before, the action items will, in the spirit of continuous improvement, will become more challenging. So I think we will have opportunities to,
And my second question is, have we thought about how we want to recognize, again, from a marketing and
Yes.
publishing standpoint, like, okay, so.
Yeah.
Have we?
Yeah, we have. We have. I mean, part of it is, being listed on the State Bar website, and then we are working with our communications office to develop kind of like a kit that the firm or employer themselves can use on their own materials, like for job recruiting or with their clients. And then we're also talking with our communications team about, kind of social media tech spotlights on these employers. And then we have some ideas about perhaps working with, like California Lawyers Association or other local affinity bar associations with job boards, and perhaps, developing preferred job boards for SEAL recipients. And then also, leveraging our relationships with law schools and their career services.
But I was thinking more along, do we have some trophies? Everybody loves a trophy.
Right, I was gonna
They
say.
can display.
Right, can we make it a competition?
For the, gold level, maybe. I could get that could get expensive if we get the buy-in in the way that we want. But for gold level, I think thinking about literally some kind of indication that they could, and that we would award to them maybe at the summit, but also maybe at like one of the bar association galas or something. So they're getting this public recognition in front of everyone.
I know the bar loves buying plaques.
Better than trophy. I was like,
we don't really do awards, but we can look into kind of the more recognition aspect for sure.
But I think there's something to be said about, making it public and making it a bit of a competition,
we don't really
right?
do awards, but we've never done this before. Maybe there's an
I mean, the first
exception
government
for-
agency that gets it, the first law school.
I like that.
Right, see, I mean.
I was alluding to that before, that, lawyers love competition.
Right, no,
And this is the best way. But, I mean, it's a friendly competition and one that really breeds great results for everybody all the way around. And to have your law students graduate from law school saying, hey, I just found out your firm or your company got this award. I'm interested in you. I mean, that's really bridging that gap of them not knowing where they're going to feel the sense of belonging. What better way to do that than to communicate, hey, we just won the award for doing exactly what we put our money where our mouth is, in other words, and we're getting recognized for it. So come here and enjoy it.
Yeah, my comment was just going to be that I think I might have made this to you or Danielle on one of the calls. This is a little akin to Mansfield.
Yes.
And that's good because there's some familiarity with what it means to compete for these things. And so, again, I don't believe in reinventing the wheel. So maybe looking at like, how does that recognition happen, and it being at least akin, then people wouldn't be like, oh, with Mansfield, I got this whole thing and you guys gave me like an email, right?
Right.
Like there might be
And if-
something, but if Mansfield, all you get is an email, then it's like, okay, the standard's not like so high
Yeah,
that we have to
right.
meet this super high thing that's out there.
Sarah,
And I will be happy to accept our plaque. Yeah. Thank you so much. Sorry, Lucia.
Wait,
Taking all
wait,
names off of the record.
what city are we giving plaques away though? That's gonna dictate who's going where.
I'll fly.
I think our next in-person meeting is in June. I don't think you have time to get it done by then. But
Oh, don't tempt me.
I would love to hand you a plaque.
Don't decide on a challenge, please. Just live to surpass it. You're giving her 2 plaques then.
I'm happy to hear it was so well received in the survey after the summit too. That's great news that people are
and
leaning into it.
People like the
And
competition.
every time we've, Leah's done a bunch of presentations on the diversity report card, and it includes components of the leadership seal. And Lisa Chavez and I have also done presentations on the report card, and we talk about the leadership seal. And every time we do it, we garner more interest. So it's very exciting.
I think something that goes with that. Oh, I'm sorry, Olga. I feel like we're jumping in and ignoring you. Let me really quickly.
Sorry,
I think
Olga.
something
It's on
that
me.
goes with that is that we are at the space now societally where people who care about DEIB want practical steps, right? Like everyone's like, okay, great, you say you care, like, woo woo, what does that look like for me? What do I do? Do I read the book? Do I go to the thing? Do I write the paper? Do I march, right? So I think you get so much interest because it's like, oh, this feels practical. I can say I care and then I can do the thing. And I think that's really useful as well. So again, kudos to you all for coming up with the things that people could implement.
And Olga, I know you have something.
Wait, Sal, how did you get a seal?
Sal got a seal on his on his Zoom screen.
I gave myself a prize for all the good work I've done. We've eliminated the little emojis to like clap and smiley face and heart. So I'm using the filters to just say yeah.
No, look at you
Good
being
idea,
tech savvy.
I know.
Sal got a seal.
Sal got a seal and he's tech savvy. I'm sorry, Olga, go ahead.
Do something else there. Then let's just keep going. I'll just do that. I'll just do this.
So there you go.
Let us
One of-
continue, please.
This is devolving.
One of the things I remember from the Diversity Summit presentation on the diversity within the profession and the SEAL program is that these 10 things were going to evolve. So you can't just do the 10 things and be done, that there would be a new list of things, right? Because we keep growing. And so is this the SEAL program? Is that something that people have to earn every year? Like you earn it 5 years in a row, so you're a top company, or is it you earn it once and then we let it be until something happens? Only because I'm curious about whether it'll get stale, or if you get it in the first year and others don't, you should be recognized for being first, kind of what is being discussed. So what is the plan for phasing in or differentiating between when and how many times the seal has been earned?
That's a great question. And so, yes, so one of the goals of this program is that list will change and become more ambitious over time. We're envisioning doing that every 2 or 3 years so that folks do still have time to implement the list, right? Like we don't want to change it every year so that as soon as you've implemented, now the rules have changed, if you will. And so I think to continue to be a SEAL recipient and continue to be a participating employer in the program, they need to commit to that more ambitious list as it changes over time. And we would need to distinguish that in like the designs of the seals that they receive, for example, so that it's also visually apparent, what list have they committed to? Where are they on that trajectory? I think some of that will be done kind of through design choices of those seals that they ultimately receive.
But in the interim, I'm not jumping the line, am I? Okay. But in the interim, in the 3-year span, 2 to 3 year span, I agree with Olga's point that like, it shouldn't just be one and done. So even if it's the same criteria for year 2, I think you have to reaffirm that you're still at, because things change, you know, from year to year. And so to ensure that, you know, the same level of prioritization is occurring for those things, even if it's staying at stable, I think they should have to recomplete the application and confirm that they still have earned it at the level that they've earned it, even if they're striving towards the next level.
Shalak.
Just a thought, Danielle and Elizabeth, that might also be useful is I'm sure when the sign up happens, and I look forward to doing that.
And being the first law school.
Yes, but I'm sure when that happens, someone's gonna have to be identified as like the contact or, you know, whatnot. And so I think it would be good that there's a year-to-year reaffirmation to make sure that it's not the type of thing where, great, Novella moves on to another great role and now nobody cares anymore at that institution, right? They're reaffirming their engagement to ensure that it's bigger than an individual, it's an institutional commitment. And maybe that means there's a signature from the person who's responsible, but then also from whoever at a higher level that's indicating an institutional commitment that now this person is implementing. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I know on the application form, or I should say, my recollection is on the application form, there's a certification component that requires that to be a senior level person in the organization. I don't know how tightly we define senior level person, but there is some consideration of, you know, there's someone beyond just the DEI point person for the program. Like they can distinguish two different folks between who will be our day-to-day contact for the program, but then also this kind of buy-in from someone high in the organization if the contact person is not, if that's not one and the same. But I think the idea of doing a year-to-year reaffirmation to assure their continued commitment, and also just to make sure that we have updated contact information is a good call.
Great. Anybody else have questions for Danielle? Nope. Well, thank you, Danielle. Obviously, you can tell it means a lot to everyone here, and we're already competing for who's going to be first. And Shalak has already said she's going to be first. Then maybe Stephanie and I can get a government agency. Which one of our agencies is first? We can compete for first government agency. So.
Thank you all.
All right, thanks, Danielle. We're gonna go slightly out of order now and take item 7.4 because Audrey is here from the Office of Admissions to provide us with an update on the Blue Ribbon Commission future of the State Bar exam. And I don't know if Ryan can hear me, but Ryan and I may chime in. Audrey is not shocked to hear that.
I'm not, and that was actually, oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, my computer first just did something weird, but I'm glad you can hear me. The first thing I was gonna say is that I hope you feel free to jump in because of course, as commissioners, that would be great to have your input too. So I was just going to give you a little update from the last meeting that we had. And in the last meeting, we didn't start the meeting as we had several prior meetings, which was kind of going over different aspects of a possible bar exam alternative or non-exam pathway. We started this meeting with a presentation about reciprocity and what to do with attorneys who are barred in other US jurisdictions, and also a discussion about foreign educated and foreign attorneys. So after we went through that presentation and a robust discussion, there was a recommendation that did get passed out of the Blue Ribbon Commission to recommend that the Supreme Court, and I'm sorry, I'm reading from the motion just so I don't have it, you know, anything out of order. The Blue Ribbon Commission recommends that the Supreme Court revise the requirements for licensed out-of-state attorneys to be admitted in California without sitting for the California bar exam. The Blue Ribbon Commission recommends that in establishing the requirements, the Supreme Court explore the minimum number of years of recent practice in another state to establish minimum competence, along with a demonstration of ethical and competent practice. The Blue Ribbon Commission recommends that the Supreme Court defer the decision to modify the admissions requirements for foreign attorneys and foreign educated applicants until the new California bar exam has been implemented. So basically a recommendation for reciprocity with attorneys who are licensed in other states, and then, you know, exploration on how many minimum years of practice would be sort of the next step there. So that was the first motion that passed out of the Blue Ribbon Commission from our last meeting. Are there any chime-ins or any questions about that? All right. The second motion that moved forward, recommendation out of the last meeting, was sort of procedural. So we had in the April 2022 meeting, the Blue Ribbon Commission had recommended a California specific bar exam. So not to use material from the national conference, but to develop a California bar exam, you know, based on the CAPA recommendations, and for it to not rely on memorization, but more applied knowledge. So that happened, but what didn't happen was sort of this like housekeeping sort of item, which we recommended in the last meeting. So if the Supreme Court does adopt that recommendation to develop a California specific exam, then the state bar, in consultation with subject matter experts in exam development, will be tasked with designing an exam. So like there was a little housekeeping of, you know, if this, then this. So if they adopt this, then the state bar will start developing that exam. And again, the design will be consistent with the guiding principles adopted by the Blue Ribbon Commission, including crafting an exam that is fair, equitable, and minimizes disparate performance impacts based on race, gender, ethnicity, disability, or other immutable characteristics. So that second recommendation was more just like the state bar will then be able to start development of that exam if that recommendation goes forward with the court. So, and again, we didn't really have much of a discourse conversation about the non-exam or bar exam alternative pathway. What will happen next is that in January, the commission will get together again to review a draft report of what has occurred to date. And then at that time, if there's any other edits to the draft report, if there would want to be conversation opened again on anything that was discussed and contained in the report, we could do that at that time.
Sal has a question.
Okay, I was like, do I have his hands? Yeah.
I have a question. Thank you for the presentation, Audrey. That was great. With respect to the California specific bar exam, curious about two things. Number one, if it goes through and they decide we're going to make our own exam different and separate and independent from all other 49 states, will it be back to a 3-day exam? And will it also include the state bar looking at whether the cut score is going to be raised again? Or will they now have, will there be an opportunity for everyone to see what does the California state bar exam look like, and whether or not the cut score can be lowered or adjusted, given that it's going to be a state-specific exam?
So a lot of those are really good. It's nice to see you again. I haven't seen you since the DIF guidelines. Nice to see you. That's a lot that was not included in the recommendation or the exploration, right? So I think in development of a new exam and looking at where we are with best practices in exams overall, especially with the recommendation that the exam not rely on like the memorization, sort of how the multiple choice might be, testing more rote memorization, but things that are more applied. I guess I don't know where that will land in the length of the exam, right? So let's say we do more vignettes, or if there's like a video component or like a model, you know, kind of law firm, or, you know, I guess I don't know where that'll land time-wise. And that's a lot of things that I could think about as someone with an interest in it, but not really know right now, because that's why we'd have this whole exam development sort of subject matter experts, consultants, and the state bar staff to sort of work on that over time. And then if you have an entirely new exam that isn't like scaled to the multiple choice, then I would just imagine the grading is also totally different. So I think the cut score like maybe there'd be a way to kind of equate it, but I wouldn't know where that would land either.
Okay. And Audrey, remind me if memory serves, and it was last year, so but we did talk about what, based on the CAPA recommendations, what categories or what areas of law we thought needed to be included in a California specific exam.
Exactly. And if you remember, if anyone remembers the CAPA recommendations, they are to take those 13 topics we test on now and narrow it to 8. And that was, I'm sure at the time in 2017, a very robust and conversation about why, but that was what was, and I can, if you want, because I thought you might ask, have all that.
Remember what all 8 are?
I have it all for you because I was like, I'm going to make sure I remember what happened in April 6th. So
yeah. I wrote it down somewhere.
That's what minutes are for. So these were the topics. Here they are. Okay, administrative law and procedure, civil procedure, con law, contracts, crim law and procedure, evidence, real property, and torts. So those were those CAPA recommendations from a few years ago that we would use in our development of the California specific exam. And also the CAPA recommendations on skills. And then, yeah, so these skills that they recommended after that committee, and this was what was put forward in the recommendation that we are making to the Supreme Court. Is that helpful?
Oh, Heather sorry, Heather, you're behind me.
So something that's glaringly absent from that list of 8 is community property, which we currently test on, right? We still test.
Okay.
And because it's so state specific, I'm just curious why we don't think that should be a topic. And then I have a question I had before you showed the slide, which is as we're evaluating reciprocity for people who want to get licensed in, are we also thinking about with a California state specific exam, will that impact reciprocity out for people who move to other states and want to practice in other states or want to get licensed in other states?
Well, latter half of your question first, it could, but what might also impact it favorably is if we allow more reciprocity in, because I think we do none of that really now. So I think that's all to come.
But
go ahead.
Just as a qualifier on that, now, if we are allowing more reciprocity in based on the national standards, though, I think that's one question. If now there's an additional factor to take into consideration with a state specific bar, I'd be curious how other states review that. So
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure because a lot of the way it works in some states that do the UBE now is that they all do the same exam. So we'll be doing something that doesn't have any of that uniform bar content. I mean, the National Conference of Bar Examiners is also redoing their exam. So all of their content is changing as well. But and the states that are now UBE states may or may not elect to do the next generation NCBE test, and that's just to come there too. So I guess I don't know. I have no idea where that will land state by state. And then we had this conversation. Yeah, we had this kind of conversation the other day at our Committee of Bar Examiners meeting about business associations. And I don't know if anyone, luckily someone on our CBE was also on the CAPA committee. And so I don't have any of that history and what the back and forth was about how to, I know it was very difficult to narrow. And again, what is always discussed is what do you need for minimum competence to practice? And so I know those are sort of some goalposts that group had, but I don't have in front of me why exactly they landed on these 8 and had, they did leave the other ones behind in their recommendations. I don't know if no one was on CAPA from this group, Elizabeth. No.
No. No, and I don't remember. I don't know that there was a discussion about why. I mean, I remember prior to our April meeting that there was discussion about what wasn't included.
Yes.
But I don't remember.
We had maybe two CAPA folks who were on Blue Ribbon. And we can send it out to you too. We had the CAPA analysis as part of the Blue Ribbon material. So I could certainly send that to Elizabeth to send to this group too, so you could see in 2017 why that was decided.
I don't practice in that area, but I will say in the 25 years I've been practicing, I probably get more questions about community property than, anything outside of my own subject matter area. So because of family law. Yeah. And so again, something so state specific that comes up more frequently than we probably all would like, I just think that's something to take into consideration in this state,
I'm getting married and working on a prenup and I'm like, I need to figure this out. Yeah, it's. To that, though, I just have a question, Audrey, and this goes to reciprocity, which you might say is too specific for this conversation, and that's fine. Just thinking about earlier, we talked a little bit about pay disparities, wealth gap. There's tons of research from economists on the impact of that to things like credit scores. And I know that some states, when they look at reciprocity and moral character, take into consideration credit score ratings, which can have racial and nationality disparities. And so I'm just sort of raising that I'm not sure if any of that has come up in the reciprocity discussion, not only about minimum competence, but ethical lawyering. But I want to raise as a comment, maybe for you to take back, that there are real concerns about using things that might be related to systemic